Chapter 331. During this meal, Zhang Yujie had a very depressed mood. Zhang Jianhua's grandfather was in his 80s this year. His body was weak, and he needed someone to serve him. However, he was very energetic and could eat and drink. Usually, he would drink a small cup of Mao Dai every night. However, he didn't drink or eat much today. He didn't say a word and didn't even look at Zhang Yujie. Zhang Yujie knew in her heart that this was the prelude to her grandfather's anger. Therefore, she had to be very careful when she picked up the food, afraid that she would break the tight string. Zhang Taiming was even more frightened. He buried his head in the food and only dared to pick up the food in front of him. People who didn't know would think that the bitter-gourd fried egg in front of him was delicious. Anyway, no one ate to their heart's content today. Zhang Taiming was a little envious of his cousins who went abroad with their parents. They didn't have to look at their grandfather every day, whom they were especially afraid of since they were young. After the meal, the accompanying staff was about to come up, but Zhang Yujie ran to Zhang Jianhua's side first and carefully helped her grandfather up. Zhang Jianhua was expressionless. Step by step, with Zhang Yujie's help, he walked to the armchair in the living room and sat down. He didn't like modern sofas, so his family specially made an armchair with a soft cushion to protect him from the cold. "Don't run away. You come here too." Deng Baoyan grabbed Zhang Taiming, who was sneaking upstairs like a thief, and pulled him into the living room. "Sit down," Zhang Jianhua said in a vicissitude voice. His voice exuded the majesty of someone in a superior position. With the old man's order, Deng Baoyan and Zhang Taiming dared to sit down on the sofa. However, Zhang Yujie didn't sit down. She stood beside her grandfather and said, "Grandpa, I know that I made you angry. I'm sorry." Zhang Yujie didn't want to admit defeat first and then fight back. She was really worried that her grandfather would be angry in his heart. When the time came, he would provoke her again and something bad would happen. "I'm old. I can't be angry. No one listens to my words." Zhang Jianhua sighed deeply. "No, Grandpa, I will always remember your words in my heart." Zhang Yujie said sadly in a low voice. "You're still quibbling?" Zhang Jianhua slapped the armchair hard and said, "They've already come to question you. You brought shame to our family. Are you going to admit it now? What right does he have to condemn me?" Zhang Yujie said indignantly. "What right does the Li family have to meddle in our Zhang family's affairs?" Yujie stopped talking. Deng Baoyan saw that Zhang Jianhua's face was getting worse and worse, so she hurriedly said, "After all, you are engaged." "Grandpa, didn't we cancel our engagement 2 years ago?" Zhang Yujie said, feeling wronged. "Grandpa, you should have heard about what kind of person Li Zichao is. In the past 2 years, he has become worse. Why do you still want to push me into the fire pit?" "What do you know?" Zhang Jianhua shouted. "Which man doesn't like to play? Don't they all settle down after getting married? If you marry him, you'll be fulfilling the promise between me and your grandpa Li. Besides, marrying into the Li family is better than marrying a useless man." Before Zhang Yujie could refute, a guard came in and said, "Elder Zhang, the gatekeeper said that the Li family is here." Speaking of the devil, Jiang Likun got the news that Zhang Yujie was back. She couldn't wait to bring Li Zichao here. She wanted to use the Zhang family's old man to force Zhang Yujie to submit. Zhang Jianhua's eyes flashed with a trace of displeasure. The Li family repeatedly came to question him. They were too impatient. They were really women. They didn't even follow the rules. However, since they were already here, Zhang Jianhua couldn't close the door. He waved his hand and said, "Let them in." "Grandpa," Zhang Yujie anxiously said, "why did you let them in? I don't want to marry him." "Shut up." Zhang Jianhua was unhappy. He turned his head and scolded her harshly. As soon as he said that, Deng Baoyan and Zhang Taiming both shut their mouths. They didn't dare to breathe loudly. However, Zhang Yujie wouldn't do that. Although her grandpa's dignity was frightening, at this moment, she was as stubborn as a blade of grass that wouldn't be blown away by a storm. She looked at Zhang Jianhua with a firm and resolute gaze, expressing her thoughts. The atmosphere in the room froze. It was like the eve of a storm. It was so oppressive that it made people panic. At this time, Jiang LeCun walked in arrogantly with Lisa Chow. She glanced at Zheng Yujie, who was standing there as if she was being judged. Then she put on a smile and greeted Zheng Jianhua warmly. After all, Zheng Jianhua was of the older generation. They didn't dare to ignore him. After all, the Li family had declined. They had to pretend to respect him. Sit down. Zheng Jianhua waved his hand and said. Soon, the nanny brought out the tea. Zheng Yujie held her head high and didn't even look at them. She found a place to sit down. Jiang LeCun said with a smile, Grandpa, when I came here the day before yesterday, I couldn't help but say a lot of unpleasant things. I'm really sorry. LeCun apologizes to you here. Zheng Jianhua's face softened a little. He waved his hand and said, It's nothing. What you said was very pertinent. It's our family's fault for not educating her well. Speaking of which, I'm ashamed of Brother Li. Zheng Yujie turned her head and didn't say anything. Haha, Grandpa, what are you talking about? How can you blame the child for making a mistake? Besides, it's not like things have reached the point of no return. Jiang LeCun covered her mouth and laughed. I didn't know that Xiao Jie was so willful and brought trouble to your family. In the future, don't worry. I'll ask Baoyan to teach her a lesson. I promise it won't happen again. Zheng Jianhua said. Jiang LeCun smiled and looked at Deng Baoyan, who was a little stiff. Then she said, In fact, it's not that serious of a mistake, right? Yujie? Zheng Yujie didn't even pay attention to her. She tilted her head and closed her mouth. Jiang LeCun didn't care. She turned to Zheng Jianhua and said with a smile, I went back because I thought about it. In fact, the child is still young. A little mistake can be forgiven. Who didn't make mistakes when we were young? As long as Yujie changes her mind, we think it's fine to keep this matter under wraps. If it causes an uproar, both our families will lose face. Zheng Jianhua nodded slightly. Then Jiang LeCun threw out a heavy bomb. Xiao Chao likes Yujie very much. He often talks about how good Yujie is. Our family discussed and felt that we should let bygones be bygones. We still have to look forward. Grandpa, I think, why don't we discuss a time and let Xiao Chao and Yujie confirm this marriage contract? Zheng Yujie suddenly jumped up. She pointed at Jiang LeCun and Lisa Chow angrily and said, In your dreams, I won't marry him even if I die. Everyone, use your votes to smash the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 332. Zheng Yujie yelled with all her strength. After yelling, she gasped for breath and glared at the mother and son of the Li family with hatred. She had never seen such a shameless person before. Zheng Yujie didn't expect that the woman would still be able to smile and put all the blame on her when she didn't give them any face at all. She even shamelessly said that she had forgiven her. It was ridiculous, but Zheng Yujie couldn't laugh. Instead, she felt more and more sorry for herself. Why did he have to be born into a big family and be pushed forward step by step, unable to resist his own tragic fate? No, Zheng Yujie screamed in her heart. Even if I die, I won't. Hearing Zheng Yujie's angry shout, the atmosphere in the living room became awkward. Zheng Jianhua's face was full of anger, and he looked like a volcano that was about to erupt. The Li family members all had different expressions. Lisa Chow glared at Zheng Yujie with resentment, while Jiang LeCun opened her mouth but didn't say anything. She rolled her eyes and seemed to be thinking about something. With a creak, the door was pushed open, and a middle-aged man carrying a briefcase walked in. He looked a little like Zheng Jianhua, but more mature and elegant. Looking at his face, he always gave people a sense of dignity. Dad! Zheng Taiming, who was looking around in boredom, suddenly stood up and shouted, Why are you back? Yes, this was Zheng Yujie's father, the rising star of the Zheng family, the second pillar of the family, Zheng Mingsheng. The Li family was on the decline. Jiang LeCun was so anxious for Lisa Chow to marry Zheng Yujie because she wanted to ride on Zheng Mingsheng's coattails. Therefore, when she saw Zheng Mingsheng, she beamed with joy and flattered him to the extreme. Why are you all standing? Sit down. Zheng Mingsheng put down his briefcase with a smile and sat down on the sofa next to Zheng Jianhua. Seeing Zheng Mingsheng, Zheng Jianhua relaxed slightly and asked, It's not a special day today. What are you doing here? Dad, there are some big projects in the province. I'm here to fight for financial support from the central government. Zheng Mingsheng smiled. It's good that you're back. Teach your good daughter a lesson. He was infuriated by what Zheng Yujie had just said. Originally, it would have been best for both of them to take a step back. However, Zheng Yujie's words put everyone in an awkward position. Grandpa Zheng felt so ashamed that he didn't even know how to face the Zheng family. Zheng Mingsheng pondered for a moment and asked, Baoyan, what's going on now? Deng Baoyan sighed and said, It's still the same, just like what I told you on the phone. Jiang LeCun interrupted with an apologetic smile. I'd like you to be the judge. Oh, tell me about it. Zheng Mingsheng raised his eyes and said slowly, I'm just a woman. If I'm wrong, please don't blame me. Jiang LeCun sat up straight and smiled. Big Sister Baoyan has already told you about it, so I won't repeat it. Today, I'm here to convey my family's consideration to Grandpa Zheng. Originally, we thought that it was a private matter between our families, so we didn't need to reveal it to the public. That's why we only came to tell Grandpa Gu about it. Am I right? Jiang LeCun smiled. Zheng Mingsheng gently nodded his head. Jiang LeCun continued happily, as if she had been encouraged. After we went back, we thought about it, and felt that the child was too young and immature. We couldn't blame her for that. So, we thought about what had happened in the past. If it was in the past, then let it go. Our two families have been on good terms since the generation of the old man. There is no need to ruin the relationship between our two families because of such a small matter. Little Chow has liked Yujie since he was young. Furthermore, this marriage is still in place. Let's discuss a date to settle this matter. After the marriage, won't our families become in-laws? Won't our relationship become closer? Jiang LeCun's face suddenly became aggrieved as she said, But I just made this suggestion, and Yujie pointed at me and scolded me. She even said that she would rather die than marry my little Chow. Is my little Chow that bad? How can he not be compared to that playboy who has no money? He can't be compared to him in any way. Zheng Yujie heard this and became even angrier. Her eyes were about to spit fire. She turned her head and said, Dad, don't listen to them. Poplar fruit is very outstanding. Lisa Chow can't even compare to his little finger. You're trying to anger me to death. Zheng Jianhua pointed at Zheng Yujie and said while panting heavily, All right, Yujie, stop talking. Zheng Mingsheng glanced at Zheng Yujie with an irrefutable majesty in his eyes. He stood up, patted Zheng Jianhua's back, and said gently, Dad, don't worry. Take a rest. I'm back. Let me handle this, okay? After saying that, Zheng Mingsheng took the warm tea from the caregiver, opened the lid, and handed it to Grandpa Zheng. With his back to the Li family, he winked at Grandpa Zheng. Zheng Jianhua looked at Zheng Mingsheng in surprise. He didn't understand Zheng Mingsheng's unusual behavior, but he still nodded slowly. Although Zheng Jianhua was still the head of the Zheng family, the achievements of his eldest son, who he was most proud of, had far surpassed him. Moreover, in politics, Zheng Mingsheng was very mature. He was no longer the young village official who needed to listen to his teachings. Therefore, when he saw Zheng Mingsheng winking, Zheng Jianhua knew that the situation had changed. He chose to believe in Zheng Mingsheng and let him handle this matter. Yes, you could be the judge, Jiang LeCun said with a smile. Zheng Mingsheng came to Zheng Yujie's side and sat down on the sofa. He said unhurriedly, My daughter really didn't do well in this matter. As Grandpa Zheng said, as a father, I didn't educate my daughter well. I'm really sorry. Dad, you don't have to apologize to them, Zheng Yujie said with red eyes. You're not allowed to talk now. Listen to me. Zheng Mingsheng glared at her and said without allowing her to say anything. These 2 days are free of charge. Everyone's subscriptions are free. Then it will start from next Monday and last for a week. Let me give you a preview. It will be 10 chapters on Monday and Tuesday, 6 chapters on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and 4 chapters on Saturday and Sunday. After that, it will return to normal. Xiaohan won't have a lot of chapters because Xiaohan is very busy in real life. I believe many readers know that. In order to make everyone happy, Xiaohan has prepared for a long time. During this period of time, he has been seriously lacking sleep. Since Xiao Han is so sincere, everyone, please vote for him. Love you all greater than over equal to. Chapter 333. I was there when Uncle Lee and my father made a marriage contract, Zheng Mingsheng said with a smile. The elders made a marriage contract, which is a good wish for the children. Jiang LeCun heard this and smiled. She patted Li Zichao's thigh and said, "Yes, when my father was still alive, he loved little Chao the most. It's a pity that I didn't get to see little Chao get married. Otherwise, it would be even better." Zheng Yu sat on the side angrily and looked at the ground with her head lowered. Her eyes were full of anger, as if there were ants on the ground carrying their shoes away. Zheng Mingxing smiled and said, "Yes, your father passed away early. It's a pity, but don't we still have you now? LeCun, you're now concerned about little Chao and little Jie's marriage. That's also a show of love." "Secretary Zheng, you flatter me." Jiang LeCun couldn't close her mouth from smiling. But Zheng Mingxing suddenly changed the topic and said with a smile, "LeCun, I still have to criticize you." "Secretary Zheng, please say." Jiang LeCun was still smiling happily, thinking that Zheng Mingsheng was just joking. As parents, it's good that we care about our children's marriage happiness. Zheng Mingsheng sat on the back of the sofa, one hand leaning on the back of the sofa and gently waving it. He said with the attitude of a leader, "But what we should do is to guide them rationally. We shouldn't be like the feudal superstitions of the past and want to do everything by ourselves. That's not right." Jiang LeCun's smile froze. She just grinned and revealed a few teeth. She didn't smile as happily as before. "What era are we in now?" Zheng Mingxing's tone was not heavy at all. "It's been 12 years since the new century, and the country legislated 10 years ago to ensure children's freedom of marriage. We shouldn't still tie ourselves to the old ideas." Zheng Mingxing said so sincerely and with so much regret that Jiang LeCun couldn't even continue to fake a smile. Zheng Yujie raised her head and looked at her father in disbelief. Zheng Mingsheng often spoke in a bureaucratic tone on TV, but at home, he was a serious parent. Zheng Yujie didn't expect Zheng Mingsheng to speak in a bureaucratic tone on this matter. Moreover, he even said a point of view that was almost impossible to appear in the Zheng family. In fact, not only Zheng Yujie, even Grandpa Zheng Jianhua, Deng Baoyan, and Zheng Taiming were staring at Zheng Mingsheng as if he were an alien. Zheng Mingsheng didn't seem to notice at all. He smiled and continued, "I think that Brother Li, who is also a party member, should have the same point of view as me. If we, as leaders, don't set a good example, how can we have a foothold among the people? How could he govern for the people? Don't you agree?" Jiang LeCun really wanted to say, "It's your head," but Zheng Mingsheng gave her too much pressure, so she could only open her mouth and force a smile. Zheng Mingxing's shock hadn't ended yet. He reached out his left hand and patted Zheng Yujie's shoulder. He continued, "I understand Xiao Jie's thoughts. After all, we are parents. As parents, we must respect our children's opinions and communicate with them. If she strongly disagrees, then I think that a forcibly picked melon won't be sweet." Jiang LeCun finally couldn't help but say, "Secretary Zheng, I understand what you're saying. We should respect our children's choice and let them have the freedom to marry. But we can't let her go to that playboy. I don't know if Sister Baoyan told you about those photos, but that poplar fruit is really not a good person. He has several women outside and has a child." "If it weren't for him," Jiang LeCun said proudly, "I think Xiao Jie would understand our arrangement. Xiao Chao is very outstanding among the children in the capital." Zheng Yujie sneered and said, "Him? Outstanding? Forget it. Since young, I've never felt that he was outstanding." Deng Baoyan tugged at Zheng Yujie's sleeve, and she shut her mouth. "LeCun, you're right." Zheng Mingsheng continued to smile and said, "In terms of marriage, we were indeed busy with work and didn't handle it well. In the future, I will properly check on Xiao Jie. The freedom to marry that I'm talking about, of course, has to be built on the premise of a happy marriage. Without the approval and blessings of parents and family, how can this kind of marriage be happy?" Jiang LeCun opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but Zheng Mingsheng didn't give her a chance to speak. His voice was very gentle, but it had an irresistible authority regarding Xiao Jia and Xiao Chao's marriage. I think we shouldn't mention it anymore. There are still many good girls in the capital. Xiao Chao, you don't have to worry. I'll let Annie Baoyan find a good girl for Xiao Chao. Deng Baoyan also smiled and said, That's right, LeCun. Let me tell you, I've been matchmaking for the young people in my unit, and I've never failed. Leave Xiao Chao to me. You can absolutely rest assured. Zhang Mingxing's rejection was very obvious. Jiang LeCun's face was very pale at the moment, but she still didn't give up. Forcing a smile, Jiang LeCun looked at Zhang Jianhua and said, Grandpa, this marriage agreement was made between you and Xiao Chao's grandfather. Isn't it bad to cancel it like this? Zhang Jianhua was surprised at the beginning, but later he lowered his eyelids, as if he was resting and listening quietly. Hearing Jiang LeCun's question, Zhang Jianhua remained motionless. After a while, he slowly raised his eyelids. His voice wasn't loud, and his speed wasn't fast, but he said very firmly, Mingxing's idea is my idea. The older people get, the more muddle-headed they become. I've been with the GC party for so many years, but I'm still living in the old era. I think if Brotherly was still here, he would definitely scold me for being stubborn. Alas, Zhang Jianhua slightly raised his head and sighed. His voice lingered in the air, as if he was deeply sad. Ever since Zhang Mingxing came back, the situation had taken a turn for the worse. Jiang LeCun was so upset that she almost vomited blood. However, she knew that there was nothing she could do. The two most powerful people in the Zheng family had changed their minds. If she kept talking, she would be seen as ignorant. After talking for a few minutes, Jiang LeCun finally couldn't sit still anymore. She dragged Li Zichao away and left with his tail between his legs. As soon as they left the yard, Li Zichao said unhappily, Mom, are we just going to let it go? What else do you want? Jiang LeCun slapped him on the back of his head and said angrily, Just give up. If you don't want to rely on the Zheng family, then so be it. What's the big deal? After pausing for a moment, Jiang LeCun said, Don't worry. Your father has the support of the old leader. We're not afraid of him. These 2 days are free of charge. You don't have to pay for your subscriptions. Then, starting from next Monday, it will continue for a week. Let me give you a preview. It will be 10 chapters on Monday and Tuesday, 6 chapters on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and 4 chapters on Saturday and Sunday. After that, it will return to normal. Xiaohan's outburst won't be much, because Xiaohan's work in real life is really busy. I believe many readers know this. In order to let everyone enjoy this outburst, Xiaohan has also prepared for a long time. During this period, he has been seriously lacking sleep. Xiaohan is so sincere. Everyone, please vote for him. Love you all, greater than over equal to. Chapter 334. The Zheng family's house was still brightly lit. Zheng Yujie stood up excitedly and threw herself at Zheng Mingxing. She couldn't help but burst into tears. Dad, thank you. She was really touched, not only because Zheng Mingxing had solved her most worrisome problem of the engagement, but also because of what Zheng Mingxing had just said. What was Zheng Yujie most worried about? It was her family forcing her to leave Poplar Fruit, not giving her a choice. Regardless of whether Zheng Mingxing meant what he said about the freedom of marriage, she at least saw a glimmer of hope from her previous complete despair. As long as there was hope, she could still fight for the future. Zheng Mingxing kindly patted Zheng Yujie's back and said, Okay, don't cry. How old are you now? Go and rest. After Zheng Yujie left, Zheng Taiming was still sitting there. When Zheng Mingxing turned his eyes to him, he hurriedly jumped up. However, after taking only 2 steps, he turned his head and whispered to Zheng Mingxing, Dad, what you said about the freedom of marriage, is that true? Don't even think about it. Zheng Mingxing suddenly put on the face of a strict father. He stared at him and said, You're not allowed to date in college. Study hard. After you graduate, I'll arrange for you to go to the grassroots for 2 years. With his tail between his legs, Zheng Taiming ran away with a pale face. Only Zheng Mingxing, Deng Baoyan, and Zheng Jianhua were left in the living room. Zheng Jianhua wasn't in a hurry at all. He slowly picked up a teacup from the table next to him, took a sip, then put it down and quietly waited for Zheng Mingsheng to explain to him. Dad, I'm sorry. Zheng Mingsheng waved his hand and asked the caregivers to leave. He said to Zheng Jianhua apologetically, Please forgive me for making the decision without permission. You're not young anymore. I know you make decisions for a reason, said Zheng Jianhua slowly. Tell me what happened. It's like this. The winds have changed recently, and we are at the critical juncture of the election. No matter what decision we make, we must be very careful. In addition, I've received some rumors about the head of the Li family. Zheng Mingxing sighed and said, How serious is it? Can you give me a hand? Zheng Jianhua asked slowly. He still cared about the friendship between him and Li family's old master. It's very serious. Zheng Mingxing shook his head and said, It involves the struggle of the highest level. However, the Li family was too deeply involved. If anything went wrong, they would be doomed eternally. It's best that our family doesn't have anything to do with the Li family. Zheng Jianhua pondered for quite a while, then slowly nodded. Actually, Baoyan told me about this the night before yesterday. It wasn't convenient to talk to you over the phone, so she had something to do yesterday, so she came back today to discuss it with you. Fortunately, she made it in time. Zheng Mingxing's fingers tapped rhythmically on the sofa's armrest. Then, Deng Baoyan sensibly left, leaving Zheng Mingxing and Zheng Jianhua to talk for a long time. At last, Zheng Jianhua sighed and said, We'll do as you said. If we offend the Li family, then so be it. As outsiders, we can't do anything about it. As for Brother Li, I'll ask him for punishment after I go down. After saying that, Zheng Jianhua supported himself on the armchair and stood up shakily. His back was straight before, but now it was much hunched. Zheng Mingxing hurriedly walked up to his father and helped him back to his room to rest. Zheng Mingxing covered his father with a quilt. When he was about to leave, his wrist was suddenly grabbed. Zheng Jianhua gently patted Zheng Mingxing's hand with his bony hand and said gently, Mingxing, I'm getting more and more muddle-headed as I get older. There are many things that you can't understand. Dad, don't talk nonsense. You're still energetic, Zheng Mingxing retorted. Don't worry. I'm not saying that I don't have much time left. This old man doesn't want to go down and apologize to Brother Li so early. Zheng Jianhua made a rare joke. He continued, What I mean is from now on, you'll be in charge of the Zheng family's affairs. Take good care of this helm. The Zheng family's burden will fall on your shoulders. Zheng Mingxing didn't answer directly. He firmly patted his father's hands to reassure him, then turned and left. In the dead of night, Zheng Mingxing turned off the light in the study, took off his pajamas, and got into bed. Say it. Deng Baoyan hugged him from behind and whispered in his ear. Say what? Zheng Mingxing asked with a smile. Don't tell me that what you said to Jiang LeCun was true. Deng Baoyan's left hand stopped at Zheng Mingxing's waist. She gently rubbed his soft flesh and asked, Freedom of marriage. Why do I feel that it's false? You believe the excuse I said to the Li family? Zheng Mingxing turned over and looked at his wife's eyes in the dark. Who believes it? Deng Baoyan muttered. Isn't it because you said it with conviction, as if it's true? Hey, let me ask you. Deng Baoyan pointed at Zheng Mingxing's chest and asked, That matter with Xiao Jie, how are you going to deal with it? How do you think I should deal with it? Zheng Mingxing asked back. It's hard to say. I talked to her today. Xiao Jie seems to be dead set on it. Deng Baoyan said worriedly. That's because she's too young. In 2 years, there won't be such a thing. Zheng Mingxing said indifferently. That's because you don't understand. Deng Baoyan pushed Zheng Mingxing and said discontentedly, Do you think Xiao Jie is still the impulsive tomboy from back then? She's 25 this year. She's not young anymore. If she waits for another 2 years, it'll delay things. Besides, you haven't seen the photo yet, Deng Baoyan said. I don't need to see it. I can guess that the Li family is so anxious. They must be scheming something. If you believe it, then you'll fall into their trap. Zheng Mingxing said firmly. If he's really a playboy, will Xiao Jie like him? That's the problem. Deng Baoyan said. I saw the photo. That person is quite handsome. According to Xiao Pang, he's quite a talented person. It's just that he has a child and has an ordinary family background. Do you want her daughter to fall into his trap? Secretary Zheng of Freedom of Marriage. Hey, I didn't say that I just let it go. Zheng Mingxing laughed. You know Xiao Jie's character. The more you don't let her do it, the stronger her rebellious heart will be, and the more she'll want to do it. You're making a fuss about breaking up with her, but you're pushing her out instead. Zheng Mingxing reached out his hand and hugged his wife's waist. He laughed and said, You can't go wrong listening to me. If you want someone to check it out and find a chance to reason with Poplar Fruit, won't the matter be settled? What are you doing? You're touching me. Deng Baoyan slapped Zheng Mingxing's hand. We're an old married couple. Aren't you ashamed? What's there to be ashamed of? I haven't been back for a long time. The night was getting darker and closer, leaving only the crescent moon quietly shining in the sky. Outbreak warning. Starting from next Monday, it will last for a week. It will be 10 chapters on Monday and Tuesday, 6 chapters on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and 4 chapters on Saturday and Sunday. After that, it will return to normal. Xiaohan's outbreak won't be much because Xiaohan's work in real life is really busy. I believe many readers know this. In order to let everyone enjoy this outbreak, Xiaohan has prepared for a long time. During this period of time, she has been seriously lacking sleep. Xiaohan is so sincere. Everyone, please vote for her. Love you all greater than or equal to? Chapter 335. Time and camera returned to Poplar Fruit's house at nightfall. It was unknown how much Song Jiwen said, but Duan Xueqing finally agreed. When they arrived at Poplar Fruit's house, the moment they opened the door, the aroma of the beer duck filled the air. It smelled of both the mellow aroma of wine and the rich aroma of duck meat. It immediately made one's stomach rumble, and they couldn't help but follow the smell. Just in time, just in time. It's just finished cooking. You can start eating now that you're here. Song Jiwen shouted as he slurped his saliva. Kiki, who was beside him, saw his appearance and giggled. She imitated Song Jiwen and took a deep breath. Poplar Fruit poured the beer duck into a plate and placed it in the middle of the table. The brown beer duck had just been dipped into the sauce, and the thick sauce was decorated with green and white spring onions. It looked very appetizing. Poplar Fruit raised his head and looked at Duan Xueqing through the steam. The girl, who was as quiet and elegant as a snow lotus in the deep mountains, seemed to have lost a lot of weight. However, her expression was still the same as before. There was no joy or anger. It was as calm as before. Poplar Fruit sighed softly in his heart. Even though Duan Xueqing was still the same as before, Poplar Fruit could clearly feel that there was an additional layer of barrier between the two of them. Song Jiwen was in a hurry to eat, so he quickly helped Poplar Fruit bring out the other soup and rice. He sat there and rubbed 2 clean chopsticks with an impatient look on his face. Poplar Fruit gave a simple greeting, and everyone took a seat at the table to eat. Because he had to feed Kiki first, Poplar Fruit turned his head and glared at Song Jiwen, who had quickly put a piece of duck meat into his mouth, saying, Don't be in a hurry to eat. Push the plate over a little, or Xueqing will only eat the dish in front of her. After that, Poplar Fruit said to Duan Xueqing, Xueqing, try my beer duck. Don't worry, the ducks are reared by the villagers. They're definitely not greasy. Duan Xueqing didn't answer. She just silently picked up her chopsticks and put a piece of duck meat into her bowl. She became more and more depressed. She just sat at the side, quietly and slowly eating her meal, almost without making any sound. If he hadn't seen such a big person there with his own eyes, he might have thought that she hadn't come. Kiki asked her father to feed her. The duck meat was very small and fragrant. As she chewed, she timidly turned her head to look at Duan Xueqing. Duan Xueqing's almost emotionless eyes made people a little nervous. Kiki was afraid, but she also wanted to look. She was conflicted as she twisted around. After eating, Poplar Fruit put down his bowl and chopsticks. He kicked Song Jiwen, who had already finished eating and was playing games on his phone, and said, Today you wash the dishes. Then he walked over to Duan Xueqing, lowered his head, and said softly to her, Come to the balcony for a moment. I have something to say to you. Duan Xueqing raised her head and looked deeply at Poplar Fruit. She straightened her skirt with both hands, stood up, and followed Poplar Fruit to the balcony. Poplar Fruit's balcony was very quiet at night. The street lamps downstairs emitted a faint yellow light, and there were no pedestrians. Behind the balcony was a piece of greenland. When the breeze blew, there would be the sound of branches and leaves swaying. Are we going to continue this Cold War? Poplar Fruit sighed softly and asked. Duan Xueqing stood quietly to the side. Like Poplar Fruit, her back was against the fence. Your hair is pressed down. Poplar Fruit pointed. Duan Xueqing looked back. She still cared a lot about her waist-length hair. One of her hands nimbly reached behind her back and scooped up her waterfall-like hair. She flipped over the fence and put it down. Do you remember when I was in my 3rd year and you were in your 2nd year? Poplar Fruit recalled and said, My girlfriend at the time came over. I asked you to come out for supper. Duan Xueqing was silent. Her memory wasn't bad. Otherwise, she wouldn't have gotten 1st place in the entire grade. The past flashed before her eyes like a movie. At that time, when Lu Yunran saw the fairy-like Duan Xueqing, she felt inferior and jealous. She secretly used some words to squeeze Poplar Fruit and Duan Xueqing. Poplar Fruit laughed and said, Don't worry. In my heart, Xueqing will always be like a little sister. In that time, Poplar Fruit was in his 2nd year and Duan Xueqing was in her 1st year. A boy from the basketball team from another school took a fancy to Duan Xueqing and chased after her. Even when Duan Xueqing was on her way to the library to read, he pulled his bicycle and blocked the way. Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen just came back from the internet cafe outside the school. Seeing this situation, Poplar Fruit was furious. He threw his jacket aside and rushed up to the muscular guy from the basketball team without saying a word. At that time, Poplar Fruit's skills were trash. The result was obvious. Even though Song Jiwen caught up and the two of them forced the muscular guy to retreat, Poplar Fruit still paid the price of being beaten up until his nose bled. Duan Xueqing supported Poplar Fruit and walked towards the school hospital. Poplar Fruit even opened his big mouth and laughed. Hey, this is nothing. You're my little sister. This kind of brat doesn't have eyes. If one comes, I'll beat one. If 2 come, I'll beat them both. As Poplar Fruit slowly narrated, Duan Xueqing quietly listened. Her eyes that seemed to be covered by a thin layer of ice had a slight fluctuation. Think about it. I've known you for almost 5 years. We've been good friends for almost 5 years. Or I can shamelessly say that we've been siblings for almost 5 years. For so many years, we've always been good. Why did it suddenly change? Poplar Fruit asked softly. Duan Xueqing's breathing was a bit heavy. She lowered her head and didn't say anything. I think our relationship before was pretty good. I treated you as a good friend, a very, very good friend. I even treated you like a little sister to protect. Poplar Fruit held his head with both hands, looked up at the sky, and sighed deeply. I don't want to change. I also don't want us to become like this because of this. That's right. Now, they don't even answer the phone. They don't even want to talk when they meet. What's the difference between them and strangers? Why can't they go back to those years that were like flowers? Duan Xueqing gently shook her head. This was the first response she made today. Can't we be good friends like before? Poplar Fruit seriously looked at Duan Xueqing's beautiful side profile and asked again. Duan Xueqing hesitated for a moment. Her red lips gently opened as she said, I don't know. Her heart had actually started to waver because of Poplar Fruit's words. However, she was terrified of the unknown future. In the past year, Duan Xueqing had been in love with Poplar Fruit ever since she took her graduation photos at school. When Poplar Fruit clearly told her that it was impossible between them, Duan Xueqing wanted to escape, because she only wanted the 2 of them to be happy together. She didn't know what her world would be like without Poplar Fruit. Xiaohan won't write a tragedy that makes everyone unhappy. Xiaohan promised. Outbreak notice. Starting from next Monday, it will last for a week. Monday and Tuesday will be 10 chapters. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday will be 6 chapters. Saturday and Sunday will be 4 chapters. Xiaohan won't have a lot of outbursts because Xiaohan is really busy in real life. I believe many readers know this. In order to make everyone happy with this outburst, Xiaohan has prepared for a long time. During this period of time, he has been seriously lacking sleep. Xiaohan is so sincere. Everyone, please vote for him. Love you all greater than or equal to? Chapter 336. Where's Papa? After playing with gold for a while, Kiki finally found that her father was missing. She turned her head and looked at Song Jiwen, who was sitting on the sofa playing with his mobile phone. Here, Song Jiwen pointed to the balcony without raising his head. Hey, Papa. Kiki saw Poplar Fruit standing on the balcony through the glass window in the dark. She happily crawled over there. Kiki wants to find Papa. Hey, no. Song Jiwen quickly took Kiki into his arms, put up his index finger, and shushed her, saying, Don't disturb your father. Oh. Kiki nodded as if she understood. She turned her head and suddenly became interested in the big shiny buttons on Song Jiwen's clothes. She lowered her head and began to button them. Don't move. Song Jiwen helplessly said, Forget it, you can play with the phone. Don't bother your Uncle Mosquito anymore. He carried Kiki back to the carpet and handed his mobile phone to Kiki. At this time, Kiki stopped. What are you talking about? So long? Song Jiwen looked out of the window and muttered. He didn't know that while he was turning his head, Kiki had already stuffed his mobile phone in a gold's mouth. Although it wouldn't break after a while, when he found out and took it back, the phone would definitely be sticky. Back on the balcony, Poplar Fruit was still nagging Duan Xueqing. You don't have to be angry with me, do you? Poplar Fruit felt that Duan Xueqing's mood had loosened. He quickly struck while the iron was hot and said, You just started working, and your salary is not high. It's a waste to rent the house here and not live in it. Duan Xueqing didn't care about the rent. She was a real rich second generation. We can ignore everything, but we can't go against money. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, Besides, you know that the old house is a bit dirty and messy. The environment is definitely not as good as ours. Seeing you torment yourself because of my mistake, I feel sorry. Duan Xueqing glanced at Poplar Fruit. All right, don't be angry. Poplar Fruit coaxed Duan Xueqing like he was coaxing an ignorant little sister. He said, Move back here. If anything happens, we can take care of each other. Feeling Poplar Fruit's brotherly care, the coldness on Duan Xueqing's face gradually faded. She was still struggling, but the scenes of the past flashed through her mind, giving her no reason to persist. Ring, ring, ring. At this time, Duan Xueqing's cell phone suddenly rang. Her cell phone's ringtone wasn't that fancy. It was just a classical ringtone. Suddenly, the crisp sound cut through the silence of the night sky. Duan Xueqing picked up the cell phone and glanced at it. A trace of disgust flashed through her eyes. This was something that Poplar Fruit didn't notice. Her fingers swiped across the screen and pressed the end of the call. However, the caller still didn't give up. The dissatisfaction in Duan Xueqing's eyes intensified. She crossed it out again. This time, she didn't wait for the caller to call again. She directly turned off the phone. Poplar Fruit saw the clue. He frowned and asked, What's wrong? What's the trouble? Duan Xueqing hesitated for a moment, shook her head, and smiled indifferently. No, it's just a harassment call. Poplar Fruit still felt that something was wrong, but Duan Xueqing didn't say anything, so he didn't ask. After all, the Cold War between the two of them hadn't been completely resolved. Duan Xueqing raised her head, looked at Poplar Fruit, and said softly, Let's go back. The problem hasn't been solved yet. Poplar Fruit scratched his head, opened the glass door of the balcony, and let Duan Xueqing go in first. Back in the living room, Duan Xueqing tidied up and prepared to go back. She suddenly stood on the edge of the sofa, her hands gently supporting the back of the sofa. Looking at Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen, who stood up to send her off, she smiled slightly. The smile of the ice beauty was like the blooming of an epiphyllum. For a moment, the bright lights in the room lost their brilliance in front of her. Duan Xueqing opened her cherry lips and said to them indifferently, Tomorrow, I'll move back. Are you free? Poplar Fruit was stunned for a moment. He thought that all the words he had just said were in vain, but Duan Xueqing suddenly took a turn. Song Jiwen reacted first. He smiled and said, "Decisive, no problem. Let me tell you, Poplar Fruit car was specially built for moving." After seeing the trunk of his car, everyone said that he didn't open a moving company. It's really a waste. Go to hell. You're the one who opened a moving company. Poplar Fruit pushed Song Jiwen and laughed. He readily agreed to Duan Shueching and decided to help her move the things from the old house tomorrow. After driving Duan Shueching home and dealing with the gossipy Song Jiwen, Poplar Fruit lay on the sofa and felt a little tired. However, although it took a lot of effort to persuade Duan Shueching, Poplar Fruit was still very satisfied with the final result. He didn't know if Duan Shueching really understood what he meant, but ending the Cold War was the first step to success. Poplar Fruit bathed Kiki and coaxed her to bed early. Finally, he thought of Zheng Yujie. The girl's resolute expression when she boarded the plane still appeared in Poplar Fruit's mind. Poplar Fruit didn't know what kind of trouble Zheng Yujie had encountered, but Zheng Yujie's expression gave him a feeling that she would never return. This made Poplar Fruit very worried. Except for the phone call, when Zheng Yujie returned to Beijing yesterday, the two of them hadn't contacted each other for the whole day. Of course, it was normal that they didn't contact each other. They weren't a couple, so they couldn't call each other every day. When they were busy, Zheng Yujie disappearing for more than a week was very common. However, the situation this time was different. Zheng Yujie was so serious when she went back. Poplar Fruit was worried that Zheng Yujie would have an accident. He decided to take the initiative to call Zheng Yujie and ask her. As friends, it was necessary to care about each other. The phone was quickly connected. Zheng Yujie's happy voice came from the phone. As usual, she didn't sound depressed. She even sounded more excited than before. This made Poplar Fruit puzzled. He asked, "Yujie, is there anything wrong on your side?" "Nothing." Zheng Yujie was still immersed in the relaxation and joy of the cancellation of the engagement. She answered readily, "That's good. I saw that you weren't very happy when you went back. I was afraid that something might have happened to you." Poplar Fruit explained, "There was something when I went back, but it's all settled now." Zheng Yujie laughed. "Really?" Poplar Fruit asked in disbelief. "Of course." Zheng Yujie said proudly. "Don't you know who I am? Everyone loves you. Flowers bloom when they see you. Coffins open when they see you. The legendary jade-faced young gentleman." Poplar Fruit couldn't help but tease her. "Go to hell." Zheng Yujie scolded with a smile. Outbreak warning. The outbreak will start next Monday and last for a week. The outbreak will be 10 chapters on Monday and Tuesday, 6 chapters on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and 4 chapters on Saturday and Sunday. Xiaohan's outbreak won't be much because Xiaohan's work in real life is really busy. I believe many readers know this. In order to make everyone happy, Xiaohan has prepared for a long time. During this period of time, he has been seriously lacking sleep. Xiaohan is so sincere. Everyone, please vote for him. Love you all greater than over equal to. Chapter 337. Yang Luoqi. A loud shout echoed in the corridor. Poplar Fruit, who was wearing an apron and holding a cooking spatula, jumped out of the open door of his house and ran to the door of Song Jiwen's house. The door wasn't closed, so Poplar Fruit pushed it open. He stepped over the small bench that was blocking the door and rushed in. Kiki was holding Goldie, one person and one dog lying comfortably on the cushion-shaped chair in Song Jiwen's living room. Hearing the movement, Goldie and Kiki turned their heads and looked over. "Ah!" Kiki screamed and covered her eyes, a classic example of deceiving herself. On the other hand, the cowardly Goldie quivered and hid behind Chi-Chi's back in a flash. "Yang Luoqi." Poplar Fruit pointed at the big TV in Song Jiwen's house and said, "You sneaked over to watch TV again. How many times have I told you? Without my permission, you're not allowed to watch." Translator. Nyoibo, studio editor. Nyoibo, studio time flew by quickly as she translated, studied, and attended classes day after day. It was already early June. Poplar Fruit didn't celebrate Children's Day for Kiki. When they went to the cinema last year, Poplar Fruit thought it through. His daughter was still a baby. How could she celebrate Children's Day? Not to mention the cinema. she could only watch others play in the amusement park. Therefore, Poplar Fruit took her to watch TV in Song Ji-won's house and watched some cartoons suitable for children, such as Pleasant Goat and Big Bad Wolf. This was not easy to deal with. Kiki was completely fascinated by the machine, with many little people jumping around. Here, I have to talk about Kiki's changes in the past month. First of all, her head was growing like a bamboo shoot after the rain. The small pants that fit her a month ago could only cover her knees now. Every day, when Poplar Fruit bathed her, he would sigh and say, "Kiki, you're lucky that you were born into a family with a father who knows how to make money. Otherwise, who will be able to support the speed at which you buy clothes?" It was indeed fast. She couldn't wear her new clothes in less than 2 weeks. On the other hand, Poplar Fruit only bought branded children's clothes, which cost 500 to 600 yuan for a pair of pants. Every time he grew taller, he would have to spend the price of an Apple phone. This made Poplar Fruit speechless. He gave all the clothes that he could no longer wear to Fong Bei to be washed and donated. Of course, he did not donate them to the Red Cross. Secondly, Kiki's speech was much smoother now. She was no longer as stuttering as before. Moreover, after following her father and listening to several English lessons that Poplar Fruit taught to Fong Bei, she could actually repeat some English words. Her pronunciation was as smooth as her father's. Although she did not understand what it meant, this was definitely inherited from Poplar Fruit's super language talent. This made Fong Bei feel ashamed. Needless to say, after Kiki's body grew taller, the bones in her small arms and legs were not as weak as before. When she walked, she would jump and jump. If Poplar Fruit was not paying attention, she might run off somewhere. What made Poplar Fruit amazed was his daughter's IQ. 2 days ago, Poplar Fruit took her to watch TV for the first time. He only pressed the remote control a few times, and she remembered it. Then, she picked up the remote control and pressed it randomly. At that time, Poplar Fruit proudly said to Song Ji-won, "See, this is my daughter. She's so smart." He even taught his daughter how to press the TV on and off and the buttons on the remote control to choose the channel. Now, Kiki had learned how to turn on the TV by herself. All she wanted to do was to sneak into Song Ji-won's house. Poplar Fruit did not let Kiki watch too much TV. After all, this kind of constantly flashing machine could easily cause damage to Kiki's eyes that had not matured yet. However, even if Poplar Fruit did not bring Kiki there, she could think of a way herself. Poplar Fruit was reading in the living room once. He inadvertently raised his head and saw Kiki and Goldie acting sneakily. Then, without saying anything, he took a picture of Kiki's crime process with his mobile phone. During this process, Goldie was Kiki's biggest accomplice. First, it could quickly find the place where Poplar Fruit hid Song Ji-won's spare key through smell. Then it would take it out and give it to Kiki. Then, because it was too short to reach the door handle, Kiki would move a small stool to the door. Kiki was very strong, but she could not move the small stool by herself. At this time, the accomplice came up again. Goldie eagerly followed beside Chi-Chi and used his head to help Chi-Chi push the small stool. It was not over yet. It even lay down and let Kiki step on its back to climb up the small stool to open the door. Yang was stealthily hid at the side and was dumbstruck. If he did not see it with his own eyes, he would not believe it even if someone told him about it. Kiki and Goldie used the same method to go to Song Ji-won's house. Then, they used the key to open the door of Song Ji-won's house. This was like a tiger entering a flock of sheep. Kiki quickly and excitedly ran to the front of the TV and turned on the TV to watch. Did you know that Kiki's intelligence was not limited to this? In the beginning, when Kiki committed a crime, she would accidentally lock herself in Song Ji-won's house. Then, Poplar Fruit would have to spend a lot of effort to open the door, or she would have to find a small stool to open the door from the inside. Now, when Poplar Fruit came in, he was surprised to find that the two thieves had leveled up. Kiki had learned to use a small stool to block the door, leaving a gap for her to sneak back in. For this reason, Poplar Fruit was angry and amused. He began to think that Kiki was too smart was not a good thing. Anyway, it was difficult for him to control this naughty little girl now. "Papa." Kiki did not wait for Poplar Fruit to scold her. She ran over, hugged Poplar Fruit's thigh, and shouted in a sweet voice, "Papa, Kiki is hungry." She also shook Poplar Fruit's trousers and acted coquettishly. Poplar Fruit lowered his head just in time to see his baby daughter's big, sparkling eyes and long eyelashes. She was like a cute girl walking out of an anime, which was irresistible. Even Poplar Fruit, who saw it countless times every day, could not help but soften his heart. He squatted down and rubbed Kiki's hair. Taking advantage of the victory, Kiki pouted her mouth and said with her eyes curved into two crescent moons, "Kiss, kiss. I really can't stand you." Poplar Fruit pressed his forehead against Kiki and kissed her. He smiled and picked her up with his empty hand. "You've seen it today. You're not allowed to see it anymore. Let's go home and eat." At this time, Goldie saw that the situation was good. It happily wagged its tail and came out from behind the cushioned chair. Poplar Fruit kicked Goldie with some dissatisfaction, but his hair was immediately pulled by Kiki. Okay, I won't hit it." Poplar Fruit reluctantly raised the shovel and swore. Tomorrow's first update will be at 0:15 a.m. Outbreak notice. The outbreak will start from next Monday and last for a week. The outbreak will start at 10 a.m. on Monday and Tuesday, 6 a.m. on Wednesday, 4 a.m. on Thursday and Friday, and 4 a.m. on Saturday and Sunday. After that, the normal update will resume. Xiaohan's outbreak will not be much because Xiaohan's work in real life is really busy. I believe many readers know this. In order to let everyone enjoy this outbreak, Xiaohan has prepared for a long time. During this period of time, he has been seriously lacking sleep. Xiaohan is so sincere. Everyone, please vote for him. Love you all greater than or equal to. Chapter 338. The first update. The next update is at 6 o'clock. Good night, everyone. Damn. Just as Poplar Fruit was about to turn off the TV and leave with his daughter, Song Jiwin came out of the bedroom rubbing his eyes. He had just put on his shirt, and some of the creases were not even straightened out. "Can't you let me sleep?" Song Jiwin yawned on the sofa and said with half-closed eyes. "Still sleeping?" Poplar Fruit kicked him and said angrily, "Look, what time is it now?" It was already past 5 o'clock. Poplar Fruit walked over, opened the curtains, and looked at the sky outside. The sun was setting in the west, and the whole city was about to enter the world of night. You have to understand, people who work all night are sleepy. Song Jiwin covered his eyes with one hand and raised the other hand to mutter, "Do you still want to eat? You're so decadent every day." Poplar Fruit shook his head and said to Kiki, "Kiki, we can't learn from Uncle Mosquito." "Yes," Chi-Chi replied in a clear voice. "Daddy and I woke up very, very early." Song Jiwin crawled a few times and finally got up from the sofa. He stretched and said, "Okay, Uncle Mosquito also needs to get up early. Let's go eat." Poplar Fruit carried his daughter to the door and said without looking back, "Wash your face first. I haven't finished cooking yet." Song Jiwin had become more and more decadent since Xiao Yao left. Poplar Fruit saw it and remembered it in his heart, but he could not do anything about it. Usually at work, this guy was like a different person. He was sunny, positive, and ambitious, and was deeply loved by the leaders and other colleagues in the unit. However, when it came to weekends or holidays, if he had no other activities, he would completely become an otaku. He played the game all night and only dove into his bed at the first glimmer of dawn the next day to fall asleep. Once again, he slept until the sky turned dark. Just like that, an entire day was wasted. I say, Poplar Fruit, why are your dishes getting lighter and lighter? Shiueching didn't come over to eat today. Song Jiwin used his chopsticks to pick up the stir-fried pork with lettuce and asked unhappily. Poplar Fruit was feeding his daughter. Kiki preferred to eat fish. She would not eat pork if it was not cooked in a porridge. Poplar Fruit wanted to change her habit of being picky, so he put a lot of vegetables in her bowl. He didn't even raise his head as he asked, "How is it light? Aren't 2 plates of meat dishes enough?" "What I mean is, why don't you have some red braised pork, yuxiang shredded pork, kung pao chicken, and so on?" Song Jiwin sighed. He picked up a piece of meat and stuffed it into his mouth, but it was tasteless. Kiki wants to eat fish. Hearing Song Jiwin mention fish, Kiki's eyes lit up. She quickly nodded in agreement. Don't be picky. Eat whatever Daddy cooks. Poplar Fruit pointed at Kiki and said, Otherwise, I won't bring you to play with Bebe. With this threat, Kiki immediately obeyed and ate her dinner obediently. You too. Poplar Fruit pointed at Song Ji-win and said, Freeloading all day and still being picky. Hurry up and eat. Song Ji-win looked at Kiki helplessly. Kiki also acted like an adult and sighed. After feeding Kiki, Poplar Fruit also started eating. As he ate, he said, I say, do you have to sleep on the weekend? Don't you have anything else to do? Why do you talk about this every day? Song Ji-win put down the bowl, leaned against the table and complained, You're as annoying as my mom. Isn't it because your mom asked me to talk about you? Poplar Fruit rolled his eyes at him, picked up a piece of fried green lettuce, and threw it into his mouth. Then he said, I think it's better for you to be like you used to be. Poplar Fruit held back the second half of his words. He put down the chopsticks and covered Kiki's ears before continuing. You used to pick up girls like you used to? Kiki shook her head discontentedly, raised her head, and said with a pout, Papa, I want to play with gold. Go. Since they had finished eating, Poplar Fruit took Kiki to the ground and let her play by herself. I can't get over this in my heart. Song Ji-win sighed and said, Every time I want to go to the bar, Xiao Yao's face will appear in my mind. She will look at me from the side, just like when she left, with tears in her eyes. I know, she doesn't want me to let other girls down. Song Ji-win paused and said, Then you'll be like this for the rest of your life? You won't fall in love or get married. Poplar Fruit put down the chopsticks and asked, That's not it. If I fall in love with the purpose of getting married, I don't think I will have any psychological burden. That's also a good explanation for Xiao Yao. Song Ji-win thought and said, Then why do you play on the phone every day? To fall in love with the purpose of getting married. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, Isn't it because I haven't met the right one? Song Ji-win helplessly said, The girls that I can see around me are either girls that I don't like or girls that I like, but they're all the same as the girls that I have slept with before. I don't think they're the type of girls that I want to marry. Aha! Kiki suddenly screamed and laughed. Her voice was too penetrating. Poplar Fruit and the others couldn't help but look over. It turned out that Kiki was playing with Goldie. At this time, Goldie's growth speed was much faster than Kiki's, and his strength was also greater than the current Kiki. Therefore, Goldie suddenly arched his body, and Kiki was thrown to the ground by Goldie. Kiki screamed because Goldie kept drilling into her arms. As a result, Goldie kept pushing Kiki back, and Kiki couldn't turn over and stand up. Poplar Fruit laughed and shook his head, and no longer paid attention to these two little guys. Then what type are you looking for? Poplar Fruit turned his head and continued to ask. Tell me, if I meet her, I'll introduce her to you. Is she the pure and cute type, or the flirtatious type? Poplar Fruit lowered his voice for the last type. Go away. Don't think of me as such a bad person. Song Ji-win said with a smile. I want to find a very powerful woman who can subdue me, but will also love me and be considerate of me. Oh, a cute and lovable woman plus overbearing and unreasonable. You're simply a schizophrenic. Poplar Fruit said speechlessly. That's too unrealistic. Change it. Say, a woman who will ride a colorful cloud to marry you is more reliable than this. No change. Song Ji-win raised his head and resolutely said, I believe that I will definitely meet such a woman. When fate comes, love will eventually come. You are hopeless. Forget it. Continue to be dispirited. Poplar Fruit shook his head. When you find your barbaric and delicate girlfriend, you will probably become ape dung. Song Ji-win snorted, showing a kind of aloofness that said, Those who walk different paths should not work together. It won't be Zhang Yujie. Don't worry. There will be 10 chapters today, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Everyone use your votes to smash the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 339. Second update. Kiki, is Daddy handsome today? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile as he came out of the bathroom and rolled up the sleeves of his white shirt. Handsome, Kiki answered without hesitation. You haven't seen it yet. Poplar Fruit was annoyed and amused at the same time. He walked around and stood in front of Kiki, asking, "How is it? Am I handsome?" "So handsome." Chi-Chi looked him up and down before pursing her lips into a smile. Poplar Fruit picked her up and kissed her affectionately. He smiled and said, "You are Daddy's good daughter." Poplar Fruit was dressed very handsomely today. He wore black trousers and a pair of frosted leather casual shoes. He wore a white slim-fit shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked very energetic and hardworking. Why is Poplar Fruit dressed so handsomely today? Is he going on a blind date? Is he going to confess? That's not it. Today was the first time Poplar Fruit was a substitute teacher. It was also the first time in his life that he was a teacher. Teaching Fong Bei Bei was not really a teacher. The day before yesterday, Professor Wang Zhongxin suddenly informed him that she wanted Poplar Fruit to help teach French this week because she had an academic conference to attend. Normally, this substitute teacher should be another French teacher in the school. As early as a month ago, when the conference notice was sent out, Professor Wang Zhongxin told the school that she wanted to find someone as substitute for the class. In the end, Dean Shinzongdai decided to let Poplar Fruit give it a try. After all, Poplar Fruit had only been with Professor Wang Zhongxin for less than a semester. According to the original plan, Poplar Fruit would have to wait until the end of the year to have the opportunity to teach on the podium. It was unknown whether it was Poplar Fruit's recent rapid progress in linguistics that moved Chunzongdai, or whether it was Chunzongdai himself who discovered Poplar Fruit's talent in teaching. But he decided to let Poplar Fruit go on the podium in advance. Professor Wang Zhongxin did not have any objections. First of all, this class did not have any practical teaching tasks. It was almost the end of the semester. According to the original plan, there were 2 consecutive French classes. The first class was to explain the test papers from the previous class, and the second class was purely a question and answer class. If there were any questions, just ask. This kind of substitute teaching was not very difficult. Secondly, she also admired Poplar Fruit's knowledge. This had already been reflected in the past teaching. As an assistant, Poplar Fruit conscientiously prepared all the materials for her. Moreover, when the 2 of them discussed after class, Poplar Fruit also showed that his French proficiency was not much worse than hers. Since the dean wanted to give Poplar Fruit a try, then she would give him a chance. When they arrived at the school, Poplar Fruit found Fong Bei Bei. Wow! Fong Bei Bei's beautiful eyes wandered. She could not help but exclaim, "You're dressed very stylishly today." Indeed, not only did the black trousers set off the huge lethality of his long legs, but the slim-fit clothes also revealed Poplar Fruit's well-proportioned body. After getting out of the car and walking on campus, Poplar Fruit had already attracted a lot of attention. If it were not for the fact that he was carrying a child, perhaps there would be even more. Is that so? For some reason, when he heard Fong Bei Bei's rare praise, Poplar Fruit felt full of joy. He happily asked, "Do you like it?" Fong Bei Bei hugged Kiki, rolled her eyes, and said, "He's just a class. You must be trying to seduce the girl to see the goldfish with you dressed like this." "I just wanted to take you to see the goldfish, but you didn't want to go." Poplar Fruit laughed. He and Fong Bei Bei were now very familiar with each other. Occasionally, it would not be a problem to make jokes. "I knew you were a weird uncle." Fong Bei Bei's delicate cheeks flushed. She hugged Kiki and gently kicked Poplar Fruit's calf. The atmosphere between the 2 seemed to be a little ambiguous. "What's a goldfish?" Kiki hugged Fong Bei Bei's neck and asked curiously. "Kiki wants to see it too, okay?" Kiki, you just need to remember that goldfish are not good things. No matter who says it. Let's not go see it, okay?" Fong Bei Bei held Kiki's little head and whispered to her, "Let's pinky promise, okay?" Although the voice was low, Poplar Fruit could hear clearly. This made him a little dumbfounded. "Okay." Kiki nodded seriously and stretched out her little finger to hook Fong Bei Bei. She said together in a childish voice, pinky promise, 100 years, no change." "Okay, I have to go to class." Poplar Fruit took out his phone and looked at the time. He said apologetically, "Please take care of Kiki. Go." Fong Bei Bei waved her hand and said. Before Poplar Fruit walked 2 meters, Fong Bei Bei suddenly shouted from behind, Uncle, you can do it. You can do it. Kiki also shouted, not to be outdone. Poplar Fruit turned around with a smile and waved at them. He then turned around and walked in the direction of the classroom. Poplar Fruit was considered light. He did not have a computer or other teaching materials. He only had a stack of papers rolled up into a bundle. Fong Bei turned around and walked 2 steps in the direction of the dormitory. Then she rolled her eyes and walked back with Kiki in her arms. She leaned against the corner and sneakily glanced at Poplar Fruit. Then she turned her head and looked at Kiki. Kiki looked at Fong Bei with some confusion. According to the previous habit, they should be going back to Fong Bei's dormitory. Kiki remembered that the big sisters, they were very nice. There were also very big dolls to play with her. Kiki, what do you say? How about we secretly follow them and see? Fong Bei suggested. Huh? Kiki tilted her head and looked at Fong Bei. She did not understand what she meant. That is, let's go and see how your father goes to class. Fong Bei said. Kiki, you must not have seen it before, right? Kiki hesitated for a moment. On one side was a big fluffy doll. On the other side was her most beloved papa. It was really difficult to choose. Okay. Fong Bei kissed Kiki and said, let's go and see with Sister Bei. Sister Bei really wants to see it. After being kissed by Bei, Kiki finally nodded happily. Okay, let's go. Fong Bei excitedly held Kiki and trotted to the teaching building where Poplar Fruit went. Be careful. Don't let your papa find out. Also, we have to make a deal. No matter what happens later, you can't make a sound, okay? Fong Bei tiptoed up the stairs with Kiki in her arms and whispered, otherwise, if your papa finds out, you will be spanked. Kiki covered her little, but in fear, and solemnly nodded. Poplar Fruit, who had always had a very sensitive sixth sense, was full of confidence and a little apprehension as he walked to the classroom. He did not know that behind his butt, there were already 2 little tails secretly following him. There will be 10 chapters today, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Everyone, use your votes to smash the poor, greater than over equal to. Chapter 340. Third update. Poplar Fruit walked into the classroom amidst the clamor. After attending classes with the French department for almost a semester, Yang could be considered to be quite familiar with them. Although every time he helped the teacher organize the things in class, he would sit at the back and never raise his hand or participate in the class. Wow! A medium-sized boy sitting at the back shouted exaggeratedly, Brother Yang, why are you dressed so handsomely today? Are you going on a date after class? His loud voice immediately made Poplar Fruit the center of attention of the whole class. Poplar Fruit wasn't timid. He took the rolled-up test paper and pointed at the boy, smiled, and said, Wang Yuba, don't show off over there. I'll settle accounts with you later. Wang Yuba was surprised and crossed his arms in front of his chest. He pretended to be timid and said, Brother Yang, I wasn't with you last night. Why are you looking for me? As soon as his voice fell, the whole class burst into laughter. Poplar Fruit didn't back down and said, You know what you did last night? This kind of banter was not uncommon in his own university life. Chatting with them, Poplar Fruit always felt that he was back to the time when he was 18 or 19 years old. The feeling of being young was really good. Sure, the guys in the class who liked to make a scene began to boo Wang Yuba. They all laughed together. The guys in the French class were actually not bad. Although their grades weren't that good, they rarely skipped class when it came to professional classes. Poplar Fruit just stood at the podium and roughly glanced around. He knew that everyone was here today. Then let's start class. Poplar Fruit calmed himself down. He felt that he was still a little nervous. Don't be fooled by the fact that he had never seen such a big scene before. He had seen more than 60 students today. However, this was his first time on the podium, excluding Fong Bei, so it was unavoidable for him to be nervous. Poplar Fruit walked to the middle of the podium. He used his trembling hands to untie the rubber band that tied the test papers. However, when he raised his head and took in the whole classroom, Poplar Fruit magically found that he didn't tremble anymore. His legs were filled with strength again. A surge of confidence came from the depths of his heart to his eyes. He didn't know if this confidence came naturally because he was strong enough. In any case, Poplar Fruit felt that he could control this class. Perhaps he was born to be a teacher. Poplar Fruit gently knocked on the table, attracting everyone's attention, and then smiled and said, "Today, Teacher Wong went out of town for a meeting, so I'll be teaching." It seems that Teacher Wong didn't inform you guys, right? The students below the podium opened their mouths in surprise. However, they quickly accepted it. After all, Poplar Fruit had been with them for so long as a teaching assistant. They were a little mentally prepared. Other teaching assistants had already taken over several classes. Poplar Fruit was considered very slow. Wang Yuba shrugged. He raised his hand and clapped with a smile. "Okay, we welcome Teacher Yang." Looking at the group of kids who were about to make a fuss, Poplar Fruit quickly waved his hand and said, Okay. You guys can just call me Brother Yang. It's just taking over 2 classes. I'm not really a teacher." After class, Poplar Fruit patted the test papers in his hand and said, "Today's arrangement is like this. In the first class, I'll talk about the quiz that Teacher Wong gave you last week. In the second class, it will be a question and answer session. You can ask me if you have any problems in your studies." Regarding the quiz this time, the overall results are quite good. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, 2 students in our class scored more than 90 points. They are In Xingyu and Xiao Xiaowei. Poplar Fruit shook his head and said, "TSK, they are all girls. The boys are too weak. That can't be helped. The population base is there." A boy sitting in the middle muttered. This was true. The French class had a total of 58 people. In the end, only 16 were boys. This was considered good in the foreign language department. Poplar Fruit continued, "There are 26 people who scored between 80 and 90 points. And the results are very good. Only 6 people scored less than 70 points, and only 1 person failed." Poplar Fruit suddenly raised his head. He pointed at Wang Yuba, who was still laughing, and said, "Still laughing? Wang Yuba, the one with the biggest room for improvement is you." Ha! Everyone couldn't help but laugh. A few boys sitting next to Wang Yuba grabbed Wang Yuba's clothes and almost fell down laughing. Did you hear that? The one with the biggest room for improvement. Wang Yuba also laughed. He enjoyed this kind of friendly teasing. He cupped his hands towards Yanghua and said with a smile, "Brother Yang, I'll be relying on you for my progress. You said that I have the most room for improvement. That's fine. You follow me and learn according to my method. I guarantee that you will score high." Poplar Fruit blinked at him without fear. "Forget it." Wang Yuba shrunk his head. After distributing the test papers to the girls in the front row, Poplar Fruit returned to the podium. After everyone took the test papers and glanced at them, Poplar Fruit began to explain the questions unhurriedly. After a while, someone realized that something was wrong. She looked at Poplar Fruit, who only took a piece of chalk and wrote on the blackboard. She asked in surprise, "Teacher Yang, where is your test paper?" Yes, after she reminded everyone realized that Poplar Fruit had already said a few questions, but until now, Poplar Fruit did not have a test paper in his hands. Let alone looking at the test paper, Poplar Fruit did not even glance at the podium. Poplar Fruit turned his head and waved his empty hands. He smiled and said, "I don't need the test paper. It's all in my mind." Everyone could not believe it. However, Poplar Fruit's performance made everyone stunned. Not only did he not look at the test papers or notes from the beginning to the end, but he also remembered who had gotten a question wrong. "You run." Poplar Fruit turned to the student and said, "You run. Only you and Wang Yuba got this question wrong. Isn't this wrong?" Yu Run looked around and realized that he and Wang Yuba were the only ones who got this question wrong. What was even more unbelievable was that not only did Poplar Fruit remember the mistakes of this quiz, but he also clearly remembered the mistakes of the other 2 quiz tests and the midterm exam. When he was explaining a question, he was always able to analyze the relationship between the question and the previous one. Then, he mercilessly pointed out that the unlucky guy did not study seriously and fell into the same trap again. Of course, there was also praise. Wang Yuba was rarely praised. He miraculously got a question right, and it just so happened that he had made a mistake on this point before. Did you think that the teacher in my tag was only referring to this? Of course, it's far more than that. Hee hee, there's still a plot that hasn't been revealed yet. There will be 10 chapters today. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Everyone, please use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 341. Fourth update. His outstanding memory was surprising because if he was willing to work hard, he might be able to reach Poplar Fruit's level. What really convinced everyone was Poplar Fruit's French. Poplar Fruit's French was not worse than Professor Wang Zhongxin's. When explaining questions to them, Poplar Fruit could often pinpoint the reason why they made mistakes. For the students who did not have good grades and did not care much about what they did wrong, the exam from a week ago had long been forgotten. They did not remember why they made mistakes. For the students who had good grades, they would remember the process of their mistakes. Then, Poplar Fruit would give them some pointers, and those memories would come flooding back. This was a very hair-raising matter. Yang's description was like a mind reader, dissecting the mental process of their mistakes to the point that it was as if she could read their minds. Listening to Poplar Fruit's explanation was actually a kind of enjoyment. When he was explaining questions, he would often focus on a small problem and explain in detail. Then, when he talked about how to solve it, he would often just skim over it. The effect was surprisingly good because they found that as long as they listened to Poplar Fruit's explanation, they would completely understand it. When they looked back at the question again, the question became very simple. Of course, it became very simple for the students with good grades. For the students with bad grades, their vocabulary was too poor. They could not even understand a reading, let alone solve a question. However, Poplar Fruit did give them a new perspective to analyze the problem. Everyone may have a different approach, but in the process, they were more or less inspired. Seeing the effect of the audience, Poplar Fruit was very satisfied. Previously, when Professor Wang Zhongxin was teaching, or rather, when he was teaching professional courses in university, the situation was often like this. The students in the first few rows in the middle were the ones who listened the most attentively and scribbled nonstop. When it came to the 2 rows and the last few rows, it was 100 different kinds of people. The 2 rows in the back were either daydreaming, quietly chatting, or playing with their phones. If there were more people, it was not impossible to sleep in the back. The 58 people in front of Poplar Fruit were not like Yin Xingyu and Xiao Xiaowei. Their eyes never left Poplar Fruit, but at least they were listening. Even Wang Yuba, who was so loud at the beginning, was not distracted. Poplar Fruit did not know that Wang Yuba actually had a good impression of him as a senior teaching assistant. When Poplar Fruit sat in the back as a teaching assistant, Wang Yuba was scared for a long time. In the end, he found out that Poplar Fruit had never told Professor Wang Zhongxin. This made Wang Yuba treat Poplar Fruit as one of his own. Today, when Yanghua mentioned his name a few times, her explanation was very reasonable. He even understood what she was saying. In the past, when he attended Professor Wang's classes, he could not understand much. This made him gradually convinced by Yanghua. Just when Poplar Fruit was talking in high spirits, he suddenly saw a little movement near the back door from the corner of his eye. When he looked over, Poplar Fruit was suddenly stunned. He stopped talking halfway, and his hand was still hanging in the air. Behind a clean window, a small head popped out. When he looked up, an equally pure and beautiful face also popped out. When her eyes met with Poplar Fruit's, Fong Beibei stuck out her tongue and whispered, "Aya, Kiki, not good. We've been discovered." Poplar Fruit was stunned for a full 3 to 4 seconds. The students in the class noticed something strange and turned their heads in unison. They all looked in the direction of Poplar Fruit's gaze. "Kiki," a girl exclaimed in surprise. It was not strange that they recognized Kiki. Last month, Fong Beibei really did not have time to help Poplar Fruit take care of Kiki. Poplar Fruit had no choice but to bring Kiki to class. Professor Wang Zhongxin even agreed. Since then, the mischievous Kiki became the pet of the students during class. Everyone also saw Fong Beibei holding Kiki's hand. They all turned their heads and smiled ambiguously at Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit was very embarrassed. He forced himself to calm down and continue to talk. Fortunately, there were only a few questions left on the test paper. A few minutes after he finished talking, the bell rang to signal the end of class. Let's rest for 10 minutes. Poplar Fruit threw down the chalk and ran away amidst the laughter of students. When he came to the corridor outside the classroom, Poplar Fruit found Fong Bei and Kiki at the corner. These two girls were equally mischievous as they giggled and huddled together, waiting for Poplar Fruit to scold them. Poplar Fruit, of course, would not blame them. He smiled and said, "Why are you guys here? Why didn't you tell me that you were standing outside for so long? We just wanted to see how your class is like." Fong Bei said with a smile. "Then come in and see." Poplar Fruit helplessly said with a smile, "It's not like our Higashiyama University forbids us from sitting in. If we go in and see, wouldn't you be under a lot of pressure?" Fong Bei said with a smile as she looked at Poplar Fruit. At this time, Wang Yubal walked past them with a smile. Just as he was about to pass by them, he suddenly turned 90 degrees and then bowed and said, "Hello, teacher's wife." After that, he slipped away without waiting for Poplar Fruit to hit him. No, Poplar Fruit did not have time to explain. He waved his hand and helplessly turned his head, but he saw Fong Bei looking at him with a red face. That shy look made people's hearts beat faster. Wang Yubal made a good start, and the other students followed suit. They held hands in twos and threes as they walked past. They also covered their mouths and smiled as they greeted. "Hello, teacher's wife." "Hello, sister-in-law." Since it was so frequent, Poplar Fruit did not bother to explain it to them. After they stopped for a while, Poplar Fruit continued to ask Fong Bei, "I still have a class. Do you want to go in and listen?" Kiki looked very eager, but Fong Bei hesitated and said, "That's not good, right? It will disturb your class." "What's not good about it?" Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Kiki is very obedient. If she says she won't be noisy, then she won't be noisy. Besides, the next class is a question and answer class, so it won't be too serious. And as you can see, they can't wait for you to go in with Kiki." Fong Bei thought for a while, but finally shook her head and said, "Forget it. I'll take Kiki back to my dorm to wait for you. I don't understand your class, and it's boring to sit in there." Poplar Fruit did not force her. He also knew that for a person who did not learn English well, it would be torturous for her to listen to a class that she did not understand at all. Chapter 342. Fifth update. Back in the classroom, Poplar Fruit just opened his mouth. "This class, where's the teacher's wife?" Wang Yubal interrupted Poplar Fruit loudly. His words caused another round of laughter. "There's no teacher's wife." Poplar Fruit said helplessly, "I'm the only friend, and I was scared away by you guys." "AI." Wang Yubal sighed and said, "Brother Yang, you're too weak. If you ran away, just chase her back." Someone else followed and said, "That's right, chase her back, chase her back." Poplar Fruit smiled and wasn't annoyed. He cupped his hands and said, "I will work hard." It wasn't easy to settle this group of people who liked to watch the fun. The question and answer class finally began. At the beginning, Poplar Fruit let them ask questions. The group of people under the stage looked at each other and didn't know what questions to ask. Finally, Xingyu, who had the best results, made a good start. She, who was a little plump, held a notebook and memorized Mama Ma's textbook. She stood up and picked out some sentences in the textbook that she didn't understand and asked. Poplar Fruit immediately showed them what was fast. Nearly 10 questions. Poplar Fruit easily answered them with a few sentences without hesitation. That kind of confidence was really charming. Of course, Poplar Fruit only used a few sentences to explain. That was because Poplar Fruit knew that Xingyu herself was a good learner. He only needed to give a little guidance, and Xingyu would immediately be enlightened. Xingyu suddenly aroused everyone's enthusiasm to ask questions. Poplar Fruit answered questions for nearly 20 minutes. He didn't even take a sip of water. Finally, Poplar Fruit could breathe a sigh of relief because someone asked a question that wasn't in the textbook. "Brother Yang, can you explain how you learned French? You're so good at it. Do you have any tricks?" When this question was asked, everyone's eyes fell on Poplar Fruit. Even the two top students, In Xingyu and Xiao Xiaowei, looked at Poplar Fruit with longing. Poplar Fruit was stunned for a moment. He smiled and said, "Yes, when I learned French, I first memorized a French dictionary. Then I read books, memorized articles, and memorized grammar." Shoo! Several students hissed. Wang Yuba shook his head and said, "Brother Yang, we are different from you. We don't have an abnormal memory like yours. Is there any other way? We also want to learn French." Yang was shrugged and said, "My learning process is like this." However, Yang tone took a turn. He thought for a moment and said, "It's not absolute. I think to learn knowledge well, the most important thing is not talent, but whether you have interest or motivation." Poplar Fruit's statement suddenly aroused everyone's interest. Let me take myself as an example. Poplar Fruit recalled, "The reason why I can learn French well is that I am really interested in the language." It is said that interest is the best teacher. This is not wrong at all. When you can keep your hands on the book, forget to eat and sleep to do something, and you can still enjoy it, then you're definitely not far from success. It's not just interest. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "What urges me to keep learning is the pressure brought by money or motivation. When Kiki was born, her mother passed away. I had to raise Kiki alone." Poplar Fruit talked about the memory very plainly. He smiled and said, "I graduated a year ago. I was doing well in a foreign trade company with a salary of tens of thousands. But because of Kiki, I had to resign and go home to take care of her." Everyone listened quietly. Even Wang Yuba didn't kick up a fuss. Some of the girls who cried, less had their eyes reddened. "It's quite helpless." Poplar Fruit waved his hand and said, "Raising a child is a large expense, so I had no other choice. I had to find a part-time job as a translator. In fact, I was good at English and could earn tens of thousands a month. But I found that the market for small languages was actually wider, and I earned more, so I began to work as a small language translator." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "So, I think I'm good at linguistics." Interest and the motivation of money are big decisive factors. After Poplar Fruit finished speaking, the audience was silent. Then, under the leadership of someone, they all applauded. "Can translation really make so much money?" After Xiao Xiaowei heard this, she stood up and asked excitedly, "I heard some senior sisters say that translation is actually very difficult to make money, and interpretation earns more. I don't know if that's true. Interpretation earns more than translation in the same amount of time. This is an indisputable fact." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "But don't underestimate translation, because translation can be done at home, and it can be done continuously. So, overall, the income is not necessarily worse than interpretation." Xiao Xiaowei looked at Poplar Fruit with shining eyes and asked, "Teacher, which company are you working for? Can we give it a try?" Poplar Fruit was stunned for a moment. Then he smiled and said, "Of course. Anyone who knows other languages can register an account on the Xinda translation platform." "Oh." Poplar Fruit hesitated and said, "I'm a member of the Xinda translation company. I shouldn't be doing this promotion in class. However, you can go back and find out for yourself. The tasks are divided into levels. You can do some tasks according to your own ability. Why don't you give it a try? Studying is not necessarily a good thing. Using some actual combat instead of practice will yield good results. Of course, you can also earn some pocket money." Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "Of course, like Wang Yuba, you have to build a good foundation first. Otherwise, you won't be able to complete the task." Wang Yuba liked to argue, and Poplar Fruit also liked to make fun of him. Anyway, Wang Yuba just smiled and didn't care. At this moment, a girl who looked gentle and weak stood up. Poplar Fruit recognized her at a glance. She was another top student, Li Jiayan, who had scored 89 points. Li Jiayan summoned her courage and asked Poplar Fruit, "Teacher Yang, what you were talking about isn't literary translation. I like literary translation the most, and I also like to read French works. But literary translation doesn't seem to make much money." Poplar Fruit looked at the petite girl seriously. He restrained his smile and said, "The situation you're talking about does exist. The domestic literary translation industry doesn't have a good environment. Often, The money that can be earned is very little. I hope and think that the domestic environment will gradually improve. I also like literary translation. Recently, I have been reading some books. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "My suggestion is that you are still in the stage of learning and accumulation. No matter what kind of translation it is, you have to come into contact with it. Of course, don't forget to accumulate your own literary literacy. When you have accumulated enough, take a look. Maybe the overall environment will have changed for the better." Don't think that Xiaohan is long-winded on the details of this class. This chapter and the next chapter are foreshadowing for the later part of the story. There will be 10 chapters today. Looking for monthly votes, looking for recommendations. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 343. Seventh Update. Wang Yuba stood up and said to Poplar Fruit in a serious tone, "Brother Yang, I strongly suggest that we postpone the decision on the quota and give us a few months to compete fairly." He looked at the students sitting in the back rows and said, "Although we are usually sloppy and don't study seriously, we don't think we are worse than Xiao Hui and the others. Isn't this quota given to us as a reward to motivate us to study? If it is decided too early, wouldn't it be too hasty? We have no chance to compete at all." Poplar Fruit smiled slightly. He looked at Wang Yuba. This boy who had not been serious since class started now had a kind of persistence and determination in his eyes. Poplar Fruit could not believe that this kind of determination came from Wang Yuba's eyes. Poplar Fruit glanced at the boys and girls sitting next to Wang Yuba who did not have good grades. He saw a kind of desire in their eyes, a desire for fair competition, a desire for recognition. "Do you all think so?" Poplar Fruit asked the students who were ranked lower. A small number of students who were not confident in themselves did not respond, but most of them nodded desperately. Even the students who were ranked in the middle and upper grades gave their recognition. Although they knew that even if they were given a few months to work hard, they may not be able to surpass those top students as they wished, but they were not willing to give up the opportunity to work hard. People are not afraid of failure, but they are afraid of not working hard and seeing the opportunity in vain. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "In fact, learning a language is a long-term process of accumulation. I don't think that 2 or 3 months can change anything." After listening to Poplar Fruit's words, Wang Yuba's eyes flashed with a trace of sadness. However, Poplar Fruit habitually changed his tone and smiled. "I appreciate and admire your spirit of wanting to compete. So, I've decided to give you 3 months to prepare. June, July, and August. When school starts in September, I'll give you a test paper. As usual, the one with the best results will follow me to Bali." "Yeah." Wang Yuba was the first to shout excitedly. Following his cheers, most of the students applauded. Poplar Fruit raised his hands and waved to calm the applause. He smiled and said to Xiao Wei and a few other students who were not convinced, "Xiao Wei, are you afraid of them?" "Why would I be afraid?" Xiao Wei was irritated and said loudly, "Give them another 3 months, and they may not be able to catch up." "That's right. With such confidence and no fear of competition, only then will he be worthy of being number 1. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "I hope you can understand my arrangement. The real strong will always believe that they are number 1. However," Poplar Fruit said seriously, "I believe that Yuba and the others will study hard when they go back. I also hope that you won't slack off when you go back. Although the story of the tortoise and the hare is only for children, I'm sure that if you go back and only play and don't study, you won't be the one laughing in Bali next semester." The students under the stage all had a serious attitude and nodded seriously. "Mr. Yang," a girl named Xianjing timidly raised her right hand and said, "I still think it's unfair." "Huh? What do you think is unfair?" Poplar Fruit smiled at her to make her less nervous. "I think that the final exam shouldn't only be a written exam. Translation is also divided into translation and interpretation, isn't it?" Xianjing bit her lower lip and mustered up the courage to say, "I think we should also add the results of the oral exam." "Then how are we going to grade?" The audience began to discuss. "That's not good. It's easy to get a high score if you have a good oral exam. Someone objected. Actually, Xianjing's suggestion is very pertinent. Poplar Fruit thought for a while and said, I didn't think about it very thoroughly. In language learning, we really can't ignore oral French. Otherwise, we'll all be mute French. We'll be laughed at when we go out. However, some students said that the weight of the two exams isn't easy to distribute. That makes sense. Poplar Fruit laughed and said, then let's do it this way. I'll give you one more place. The exam is divided into oral and written exams. The oral exam is to talk to me. For the written exam, I'll give you a short essay to translate. The first place of the oral exam and the first place of the written exam will both get a free trip to Bali. Everyone couldn't stay calm. They looked at each other and estimated which aspect they had the most advantage. After all, oral and written exams were different. If they did the right thing, they might be able to stand out. Brother Yang, Brother Yang. Wang Yuba was restless again. He raised his hand and shouted in the crowd. What's wrong with you? Do you want to go to the bathroom? Poplar Fruit laughed. His dry humor got a lot of laughter. No, Wang Yuba said with a straight face. Brother Yang, you see that we have 60 people in our class. Isn't it too little to give us 2 places? Give us a few more places? Do you think that 58 people fighting for 2 places is too intense? Poplar Fruit looked at him with a smile. Wang Yuba nodded desperately. Then you can withdraw from the competition. The other 57 people fighting for 2 places won't be so intense. Poplar Fruit laughed and said. Wang Yuba suddenly shrank his head back. He was scared by Poplar Fruit and didn't dare to raise his head. You are too cunning. If you used this little energy to study, you wouldn't be at your current level. Poplar Fruit pointed at him and laughed. The places won't be increased. There will only be 2 places. Whoever can go to Bali with me. It will depend on your performance in these 3 months. The class was still going on, but Poplar Fruit could feel that most of the people present were secretly holding back their energy. Poplar Fruit suddenly looked forward to the results after 3 months. He wanted to know what kind of effect his sudden idea would have after being heckled. In fact, including the round-trip ticket, food, and accommodation, one person would at most cost Poplar Fruit more than 10,000 yuan. This amount of money for the current Poplar Fruit was still considered money. The bell rang to signal the end of class. Poplar Fruit didn't pack up. He stood in front of the lecture, clapped his hands, and smiled. Well, today's class is over, and this semester's class should be over. The next time we meet should be next semester. I also look forward to seeing the results of your efforts in these 3 months. Of course, I hope you remember. Poplar Fruit said seriously, what you get from me is the happiness of being able to go abroad for a few days. But the endless wealth you enjoy is the real mastery of your own French ability. As soon as Poplar Fruit's voice fell, everyone stood up at the same time and applauded desperately. The thunderous applause lasted for 2 minutes. Happy, proud, and touched, Poplar Fruit suddenly felt that he really enjoyed the feeling of being a teacher. There are still 3 updates today. Looking for monthly votes, looking for recommendations. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 344. 8th update. The roads on Higashiyama University's campus weren't neat because there were too many trees here. Regardless of whether it was the dignified, deep green camphor, the bold and simple little banyan tree, or the white kiangsiu that reached into the clouds, all of them together set off the green and exuberant vitality of Dongshan University. Yang would pass through the weeping willows by the small lotus pond and walked under the acanthus trees, whose leaves were so green that they oozed oil and whose petals were as red as fire. She happily walked towards Fong Beibei's dormitory building. The lesson just now gave Poplar Fruit a sense of accomplishment. He had a lot of things he wanted to tell Fong Beibei. After another turn, he would reach Fong Beibei's dormitory. Poplar Fruit was about to take out his phone to call Fong Beibei down. However, just as he turned the corner, Poplar Fruit looked up. The scene in front of him made him stop in his tracks, and his right hand that was already reaching for his phone. Stunned for a moment, Poplar Fruit took a step back and returned to the corner. Poplar Fruit saw Fong Beibei. She was downstairs, and in front of her stood a boy holding a bouquet of bright roses. Hiding in the corner, Poplar Fruit poked his head out and looked from afar. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Although he could only see the side of his face, Poplar Fruit felt that the boy was quite handsome. He was thin and tall. Of course, he couldn't be compared to Poplar Fruit himself, but he could be considered a little Prince Charming. He wore a red plaid shirt, slim jeans, and blue canvas shoes. He looked very clean. Poplar Fruit curled his lips. He felt that the boy's manly aura was lacking. He was dressed like a Korean, so he definitely wasn't a straight man. At this time, Poplar Fruit noticed that Fong Bei was dressed very beautifully today. The pure white jacquard off-shoulder dress and the two-piece pleated waist design made Fong Bei look even slimmer. She was really beautiful. Why didn't he notice it just now? Poplar Fruit could see from afar that the boy was saying something affectionately. Although he knew many languages, he couldn't read lips. However, Poplar Fruit felt that this scene was very obvious. He softly muttered, "Is it this kind of melodramatic confession scene again? How boring." But Fong Bei didn't look bored at all. Poplar Fruit was depressed to find that Fong Bei was listening to him with a smile. Poplar Fruit thought, "Is there a need to continue listening? I've watched enough TV dramas. If it's Xueqing, she would have turned her head." This wasn't unprecedented. When he was in university, there were many boys who were defeated in front of Duan Xueqing's dormitory. Poplar Fruit didn't know why, but when he saw Fong Bei's smile, his heart felt very uncomfortable. The boy seemed to have finished his confession. He lowered his head and held out the flowers in his hands, waiting for Fong Bei's judgment. She won't accept it, Poplar Fruit thought with certainty. However, his hands were trembling, and he couldn't help but have the urge to rush out. Suddenly, Poplar Fruit's eyes widened. He saw Fong Bei hesitate for a moment before reaching out her hand to take the flowers. As if he was struck by lightning, Poplar Fruit's mind suddenly went blank. He completely lost the ability to think and only blanked out. Standing in the same spot, Poplar Fruit seemed to have turned into a piece of rock, unable to move. This was too unexpected. How could Fong Bei, how could she accept that boy's flowers? Poplar Fruit felt as if his world had collapsed in an instant. He stared blankly. He saw Fong Bei smile and say something to the boy. Then he saw her open her empty hand and hug the boy. From Poplar Fruit's angle, he could only see Fong Bei holding the flowers and walking up the dormitory building. He didn't see the sad expression on the boy's face when he left. After a long time, Poplar Fruit recovered from his out-of-body state. Poplar Fruit only felt that his thoughts were in a mess. He couldn't sort them out at all and couldn't get rid of them. His entire heart and even his internal organs were soaked in a thick sense of jealousy. This feeling was not unfamiliar. Poplar Fruit had also experienced it when he was with Lu Yunran. Is this because of love? Poplar Fruit suddenly had a hint of understanding, but seemed to be too late. Is it because of a breakup? Poplar Fruit felt a bitter taste in his mouth. But I haven't even started dating Bei. Why didn't he confess earlier? Poplar Fruit knew that he liked Fong Bei. This wasn't something that happened in a day or two. A long time ago, he couldn't help but want to be with Fong Bei. He liked the feeling of being with her. Then, a few months ago, he figured out that he probably liked Fong Bei. However, he had been hesitating. He felt that it wasn't time to tell Fong Bei. At this moment, it was too late to regret. Poplar Fruit knew that he had finally tasted the bitter fruit of uncertainty. However, his daughter was still upstairs. Poplar Fruit took out his phone in a daze. He didn't know what to say, but Fong Bei brought Kiki downstairs. Fong Bei was really beautiful. Even though he was disappointed and sad, Poplar Fruit couldn't help but be moved the moment he saw Fong Bei. As usual, Fong Bei held Kiki's hand and stood there looking at Poplar Fruit with a smile. She was wearing a pure white dress. Her hair was stuck to her temples because of the hot weather, and her shoulders were round and smooth. Her skin was so smooth and delicate that people couldn't help but have the urge to pull her into their arms. Poplar Fruit couldn't help but admire the girl in front of him. She was so beautiful that it was as if she had walked out of a painting. However, This description seemed familiar. Was it last year when she went back to school to take graduation photos? At that time, Fong Beibei also seemed to be wearing a dress. Poplar Fruit could still remember that it was a powder blue dress. At that time, because Fong Beibei had just graduated from high school, her hair only reached her shoulders. She was by the beautiful lotus pond. Her slim and elegant figure softened the sparkling water. Her devastatingly beautiful appearance made the flowers pale in comparison. Her beautiful eyes were filled with longing. The moment Fong Beibei turned her head, Poplar Fruit could still clearly remember. Whether it was the thousands of flirtatious expressions when she looked back or the mischievous and sly smile, they were all so captivating. The faint fragrance of that summer's wind seemed to linger around the tip of his nose. That was also June, right? Yes, they had already known each other for a year. Poplar Fruit suddenly felt a pain in his heart, because when he thought that the girl in front of him had already accepted that boy, his heart ached. So, I'll leave Kiki to you. Fong Beibei saw that Poplar Fruit didn't say anything and said with a smile, "Oh." Poplar Fruit somewhat stiffly held his daughter's hand and prepared to turn around and leave. But, in the end, he couldn't help but turn around. Looking at Fong Beibei, he hesitantly asked, "Just now, that boy." Speaking up to here, Poplar Fruit found that he couldn't continue. "You saw everything?" Fong Beibei asked in astonishment. Poplar Fruit lightly nodded his head. He paused for a moment, but still didn't give up and asked, "Agreed to him?" There are still 2 updates today. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Everyone, use your votes to smash the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 345. 9th update. Fong Beibei blinked her clear eyes, shook her head slightly, and said, "No." The boundless expanse, the blue sea and vast sky, the vast expanse of stars. Yang's current state of mind was indescribable. Her originally messy and congested state of mind was instantly smoothed out. It was as if she had pushed against a wall, and her entire heart was enlightened. Suppressing his joy, Poplar Fruit stuttered and asked, Then why?" He made a hugging gesture. Fong Beibei giggled and explained, "He was rejected, so don't be too cruel. A hug in exchange for his good mood." She shrugged, as if she had done something trivial that didn't need to be taken to heart. "Uh-huh." Poplar Fruit nodded vigorously. In the past 10 minutes, Poplar Fruit experienced the 2 processes of happiness to sadness, and sadness to happiness again. His mind was still a little messy. Poplar Fruit asked Fong Beibei if she wanted to go to the teacher's dormitory to study today. Fong Beibei shook her head and said, "No, it's almost the end of the semester. I'm going to start hanging out." Fong Beibei's rejection didn't make Poplar Fruit depressed. He was still immersed in his happy mood. After a few words, Poplar Fruit happily brought Kiki home. Poplar Fruit didn't notice that when he left, Fong Beibei, who had already gone upstairs, appeared on the 2nd floor balcony again. At this moment, she looked at Poplar Fruit's back with a smile in her eyes. Fong Beibei's complex emotions intertwined in her eyes. He probably didn't think that Fong Beibei's previous smile was actually a forced smile. This story had to start from when Fong Beibei brought Kiki back to the dormitory. When Fong Beibei returned to the dormitory, everyone else had gone to the bar. Only the carefree Lu Ruhua was still sitting in the dormitory, watching a movie. La, Hua, look who's here." Fong Beibei pulled Kiki in and smiled. "Wait, let me laugh for a while." Wearing pajamas, Lu Ruhua hugged her feet as she sat on the chair and laughed without a care for her image. "What movie? Is it that funny?" Fong Beibei put some of her belongings on her desk and asked doubtfully. "All those years, we chased after girls together." Lu Ruhua was shaking with laughter. She pressed the pause button, turned around, and said, "Oh, Kiki is here." "Hello, Sister Huahua." Kiki greeted politely. "Hello, Kiki is so cute." Lu Ruhua smiled and waved at Kiki. "Didn't we already go to the cinema to watch this movie?" Fong Beibei asked doubtfully. That time, they went to watch it together in the dormitory. "My Beibei, you all went, only I didn't go." Lu Ruhua sighed and said, "I went out with the club for a day, but you all left me to watch a movie. Uh-huh. Fong Beibei remembered and laughed without any guilt. Haha. Right? You didn't go, it's a big loss. No, I was only late by a few months. Lu Ruhua said without any regret. Also, the movie I watched was the original version, unlike the ones you saw in the cinema, which were all edited by some department. Lu Ruhua said excitedly. Let me tell you, there was a particularly funny scene at the beginning. You definitely haven't seen it before. Hey, don't say it. I'll watch it myself tonight again. Fong Beibei quickly covered her mouth and said. At this time, Kiki walked to the other girls' seats and looked at the delicate decorations on their bookshelves with curiosity and envy. Lu Ruhua pressed the play button and continued watching. She didn't wear headphones, so the sound came from the computer. Fong Beibei didn't pay attention, but Kiki followed the sound. She staggered to Lu Ruhua's seat and stretched her neck to look at the table, but at her height, she couldn't see anything. Sister Huahua. Kiki pulled Lu Ruhua and asked, Is it Pleasant Goat? Sister doesn't have Pleasant Goat here. Lu Ruhua quickly sat upright again and put Kiki on her lap. She smiled and said, Do you want to watch a movie? Yes. Kiki replied without looking back. She stared at the computer intently. Whether it was Pleasant Goat or something else, as long as she could watch the computer or TV, she liked it. Children can't watch this kind of movie. Fong Beibei finally took out the Tangram toy she had prepared for Kiki from her drawer and walked over with it. At this time, the movie just happened to play to the end. With the movie's interlude, Ku Jingting hugged the groom and kissed him. Fong Beibei blushed and hugged Kiki, covered her eyes, and said, Ahua, don't let children watch this. Oh. Lu Ruhua pressed the spacebar again and said helplessly, You ruined this classic scene again. Kiki also wants a kiss. Kiki giggled. She allowed Fong Beibei to cover her eyes. Instead, she moved closer and pouted her rosy little mouth. Fong Beibei felt that she was defeated by this little girl. Huh. Lu Ruhua laughed so hard that she leaned on the table and asked, Kiki, who taught you this? Kiki turned her head and replied, Papa taught me. Lu Ruhua's eyes revealed a naughty look. She smiled silently and suddenly asked, Kiki, did your papa kiss Sister Beibei? Hey, Ahua, you're a bad influence on children. Fong Beibei said with a red face. Chi-Chi, on the other hand, thought about it very seriously. After thinking for a while, she shook her head and said innocently, No, Papa only kisses Chi-Chi. Oh, not only did he kiss Kiki. Kiki was not very sure. She tilted her head and thought for a while, then raised a finger and said, Papa also kissed Annie once. Poplar Fruit probably did not expect that the scene of Zheng Yujie suddenly hugging him and kissing him at Lu Yunran's wedding was accidentally seen and remembered by Kiki. After Kiki finished speaking, Fong Beibei's dormitory suddenly became very quiet. Kiki always called Fong Beibei Beibei or Sister Beibei. Whether it was Fong Beibei or Lu Ruhua, they could tell that the Annie Kiki was talking about was definitely not Fong Beibei. Something big happened. Something big happened. After being silent for a long time, Fong Beibei suddenly laughed. She carried Kiki back to her seat and played with Kiki as if nothing had happened. Lu Ruhua hesitated for a moment, but she still did not say anything to Fong Beibei. She kept silent, because Fong Beibei always had her own ideas, and she also knew that Fong Beibei had a past that she only talked about once. Do you still remember chapter 152? Some mistakes and misunderstandings happened unintentionally, and it happened when it was not under one's control. However, as the saying goes, if you don't seek death, you won't die. It's not that easy to get the beauty back. Poplar Fruit still has a lot to do. However, Xiaohan said that the fruit spring will always be warm and the flowers will bloom. Everyone, please don't worry. There will be one more update today and 10 more updates tomorrow. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 346. 10th update. Tomorrow's first update will be in 2 hours. After returning home, Poplar Fruit began to reflect on himself. He was too hesitant. After holding back for a few months, he didn't confess. Fortunately, Fong Beibei didn't promise anyone else. If she did, where'd he go to cry? Poplar Fruit thought it through. He couldn't go on like this. Wasn't there a poem that said so? If there are flowers to pluck, pluck them straight. Don't wait until there are no flowers to pluck. Poplar Fruit decided to confess to Fong Beibei. Before that, Poplar Fruit had to make sufficient preparations. Firstly, Fong Beibei was about to take the final exam. It was not the right time to confess now. He had to wait until her final exam was over. Secondly, Poplar Fruit also wanted to come up with a romantic idea. He didn't want to confess with heart-shaped candles on the streets. He wanted to give Fong Beibei a unique surprise. Therefore, Poplar Fruit was also preparing in seclusion. Sometimes Song Jiwen would come over and find Poplar Fruit hiding in the study and fiddling with the computer. He didn't even show it to him. He looked like he was babbling on and on. If it weren't for Kiki sitting next to Papa and giving advice, Song Jiwen would really suspect that Poplar Fruit was watching some educational film to comfort his lonely body. Why wasn't a lonely body? Wasn't there a sentence on the internet? Loneliness is having someone you love, but the person you love is not by your side. Loneliness is having no lover and being alone. Poplar Fruit could be considered a lonely man who was surrounded by orioles and swallows, but he didn't like anyone, right? Poplar Fruit wasn't as dirty as Song Jiwen thought. He also wasn't interested in paying attention to Song Jiwen. He wholeheartedly prepared according to his plan. There was only one thing that slightly distracted Poplar Fruit. At that time, the Shinda Translation Company was looking for Taobao to shoot a video for publicity, and the people in charge of this project were the few people from the minority language team that Poplar Fruit had personally appointed. When a girl named Chu Tong was discussing the script with Moneymaker, she strongly recommended Poplar Fruit. It was said that the idea for Moneymaker's product placement came from Poplar Fruit. After 2 months of discussion and editing, the script was finally completed. Poplar Fruit also received the script immediately. He had to play an important supporting role in it. After reading the script, Poplar Fruit could not help but clap for the beast. This person was really too talented. Although the script looked like a fast-paced micro-movie script, it was mixed with a lot of funny elements. The plot was absurd, but all-encompassing. The innovative and unique perspective and simple and humorous language made Poplar Fruit's eyes light up, especially the lines designed in the script. They were funny, but also had some meaning. Every time it made Poplar Fruit laugh, it made him think deeply. This would be a very good micro-movie script. After Poplar Fruit put down the script, he had a deep feeling. Of course, as an investor, he was also examining the effect of the product placement in the script. In the end, he realized that not to mention the audience who would see the video in the future, just by reading the script once, his brain was about to be brainwashed by the Shinda Translation Company. Looks like this investment is not bad. Poplar Fruit touched his chin, his heart blooming with joy. Of course, Poplar Fruit's appearance this time was on behalf of the investor. There was no remuneration, it was purely free work. Poplar Fruit did not care. He was not a real actor. Just being able to play on the set was worth the ticket money. Moreover, he did not care about that little bit of remuneration. The next day, Poplar Fruit received a confirmation call from the Beast. Although it was not sure if Poplar Fruit was really as good as the professional translators said, the Beast knew that Poplar Fruit was an executive of the Shinda Translation Company. Moreover, in this cooperation, Poplar Fruit could be said to be one of the main driving forces of Shinda. Therefore, the Beast still respectfully addressed Poplar Fruit as Teacher Yang. "Hey Beast, don't be like that." Poplar Fruit laughed. "If you call me that, it will give me a lot of pressure. I'm not that old. You could just call me Poplar Fruit." Although he had been Teacher Yang for a day, Poplar Fruit still seemed to be a little unaccustomed to being addressed as such. Okay. The Beast's unique and delicate voice made it hard to imagine that the person on the other side of the phone was a middle-sized fat man with a bald head. "Then I'll call you Poplar Fruit. Yesterday, I asked your company's Chu Tong to send the script to you. Did you read it?" I read it. Poplar Fruit laughed. "Your script is so funny. I almost had a stomach cramp from laughing yesterday." All right, what are you going to name this movie? I never thought that I'd want to take the West scripture, the beast replied. Poplar Fruit was an investor. He didn't know if Poplar Fruit would agree to a movie name that had nothing to do with Shinda's translation. Well, it's pretty good. Poplar Fruit was actually just asking. He didn't want to make any decisions in the movie that the beast had designed. Besides, if the beast had a strange name like Shinda's translation, I want to take the West scripture, he might feel that the name would affect the movie's aesthetic too much. Then, Poplar Fruit, do you think the role I designed for you is suitable? The beast asked happily. There's nothing inappropriate about it. Poplar Fruit laughed. I didn't know that I had so many scenes. It's okay. I'll try my best to cooperate with you in this movie. That's really great. The beast said happily. We still have a few days to prepare in the early stages. It's estimated that we'll start shooting at the end of the month. When do you plan to come over? I can adjust the shooting order according to your time. Poplar Fruit had unknowingly enjoyed the treatment of a big star. At the end of the month, no problem. I can come over at any time. Poplar Fruit estimated that Fong Bei would finish her exams in the middle of the month. After his confession, he could take Fong Bei to Beijing to play. Then it's settled? Poplar Fruit, do you have any other questions? The beast asked. Poplar Fruit thought for a moment. He hesitated and asked, Professor, is there anyone who can play the running Zhu Beiji in your script? The beast was stunned and said, Not yet. I'm preparing to ask our special effects artist to make a guest appearance if I can't find a good role. He hesitated and asked, Poplar Fruit, do you have anyone to recommend? To be honest, the beast was a little uneasy. He didn't want to see his sponsor casually putting people into his crew. He only agreed to let Poplar Fruit join after Chu Tong said a lot of good things about Poplar Fruit. I have a friend who wants to be an actor. Yang Guo could hear the displeasure in Mr. Beast's voice and quickly explained, I'm just trying to get an audition opportunity from you, Mr. Beast. I'm not forcing him to play the role. If he's not suitable, it's fine if you don't use him. Continue reading tomorrow, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Everyone, please use your votes to support the poor, greater than over equal to. Chapter 347. After listening to Poplar Fruit's explanation, the man's tone softened a lot. He was a man of principle after all. However, as long as Poplar Fruit did not force him, everything was negotiable. So that's how it is. The beast asked, Yang Guo, is that friend of yours an acting major? No. Poplar Fruit denied repeatedly and laughed. He started out as a martial artist, and his footwork is pretty good. I think, other than his figure, he's very suitable for this character who often performs escape scenes. It doesn't matter if he's a little thin. Our movie is actually trying to subvert the audience's perception, the man said. Poplar Fruit, do you have any video of him? I want to make a preliminary judgment. Video? Poplar Fruit was stunned for a moment. He had not known Shan Juan for long. How could he have any video of him? I don't, but I can ask him to film one for you tomorrow. What kind of video do you want? The man thought for a moment and said, Didn't you say he's good at running? Then let's do a parkour video and make him look funny. This was a little more difficult. The man wanted to raise his bar. Otherwise, he would not be able to film his movie if he kept shoving people in. Okay, no problem. Poplar Fruit agreed immediately. He decided to let Che and Juan act a parkour scene according to the plot in the script. Oh, right. Poplar Fruit became a little hesitant at this time. Beast, I saw that the special effects in your videos are very good. Can I ask you for a favor? Afraid that the man would misunderstand, he hurriedly added, This has nothing to do with the company. I can pay for your labor. What do you need our help with? Poplar Fruit's words piqued the beast's interest. It didn't discuss the cost with Poplar Fruit, but asked directly. It's like this. Poplar Fruit told the beast about his plan to confess to the girl he loved, and then said, That video, my skills are too bad. No matter what I do, I can't get it right. That's why I wanted to ask you guys to make it look good. Huh? The beast laughed and said, I thought you had something important to do, so it's just to help with the video. No problem. It's very simple. Send us your source material or first draft, and we'll finish it in one night. As for the labor cost, the beast laughed. It's just a small matter. We don't need to pay for it. If our videos can help you, we feel that it's worth it. Thank you. Okay, I'll treat you guys to a meal when I get back to Beijing. Poplar Fruit happily hung up the phone. After putting down the phone, Poplar Fruit hugged Kiki and kissed her fiercely. He smiled and said, "Kiki, Daddy finally doesn't have to worry so much anymore." These past few days, making this video had really worried him to death. Without further ado, Poplar Fruit hurriedly went to find Che and Juan. After Che and Juan was caught by Poplar Fruit, he became much more stable. He didn't go on any more missions. In the past few months, he went to a rural area on the outskirts of Yangcheng, bought a big yard, and built a house. Before the village and the city was collectively demolished, he moved the ancestral tablets of his sect's seniors there, which could be considered as fulfilling his wish. When he saw Poplar Fruit, Che and Juan almost cried. After so long, he thought that Poplar Fruit's words were just to comfort him. He didn't expect that Poplar Fruit really cared about his future. After listening to Poplar Fruit's explanation of the micro-movie, Che and Juan didn't mind that the role was too small and the movie's investment was too little. He was already very satisfied to have Chance. After explaining the plot to Che and Juan, Poplar Fruit asked, "How is it? Do you understand?" "Understood." Che and Juan nodded and said solemnly, "Give me some time to prepare." After saying that, he ran to a corner to think about it. Poplar Fruit was a little bored and picked up the tools used to shoot the video, the professional DSLR that Che and Juan used. Poplar Fruit also bought a DSLR, but it wasn't as good as Che and Juan's, so he didn't bring it. Looking at the huge Zeiss lens that cost tens of thousands of yuan, Poplar Fruit pursed his lips. It was said that DSLR cameras were poor for 3 generations. It wasn't wrong at all. This lens, along with the other lenses in Che and Juan's bag, was worth more than 150,000 yuan. Che and Juan was willing to spend so much money on a lens while he himself was poor and frugal. Che and Juan could be considered a weirdo among weirdos. The lens was a little expensive, but the principle of using a DSLR camera was the same. Therefore, Poplar Fruit was quite comfortable with using it. Stand there, stand there. Yes, don't move. Come, give me a smile. Ha, okay. Let's take another one." While trying out, Poplar Fruit teased Kiki and took a few beautiful photos of her. Looking at the photos he just took with Kiki, who was curiously looking at the small screen, Poplar Fruit proudly found that the high-definition camera and his first-class photography skills made the photos look quite good. Especially in this photo, Kiki covered the sun behind her. Her whole body was radiant like the Guanyin Bodhisattva, and her hair was also shining. Moreover, Yanghua had also exposed the surrounding areas with highlight, so Chi-Chi's innocent smile could still be seen clearly even under the backlight. It was like those little fresh photos that were very popular on the internet. Poplar Fruit took a few more photos so that he would have material for his Weibo. Recently, he posted less on Weibo, and his fans were making a fuss. When taking photos of Kiki, Poplar Fruit's technique was really good. However, when it came to video shooting, Poplar Fruit was a complete novice. Although Poplar Fruit could control his hands so that the camera wouldn't shake too much when he moved, his bad angle and messy combination of long and close shots ruined Che and Juan's performance. "I'm going to faint." After 3 consecutive NGs, Che and Juan walked over and took the DSLR camera from Poplar Fruit's hand. He looked at him helplessly and said, "Run like I just ran again, and I'll take a photo for you." Poplar Fruit could simply imitate Che and Juan's movements. In terms of body movement, Poplar Fruit was slightly inferior, but Poplar Fruit had the support of internal energy. His breath was long and his body was light. His running speed was not necessarily worse than Che and Juan's. His mind had long recorded the trajectory of Che and Juan's running. Poplar Fruit ran along this trajectory from the beginning, dodging the big tree, jumping over the low wall, bricks and tiles, and finally jumping up the high wall. Like riding a horse, he looked back and smiled. It was a bit difficult to make Poplar Fruit make the same expression. He simply didn't learn how to act. He learned how to make all kinds of exaggerated expressions along the way, but none of them were done properly. Looking back, he also smiled foolishly, far worse than Che and Juan. There will be 10 updates today, begging for monthly votes begging for recommendations. Everyone, take your votes and throw them at the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 348. Second update. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit was just running around, and then Chang-Yuan filmed it and showed it to Poplar Fruit how to stand and adjust the lens of the camera. Almost one more time. Chang-Yuan changed to another point this time, raised his hand, and shouted, "Huh, come on, Papa." Kiki jumped and clapped. At first, she wanted to follow her father and run from the side. Poplar Fruit was worried that Kiki would affect Chang-Yuan's shooting, so he quickly coaxed her away. With his daughter's encouragement, Poplar Fruit completed it better than the last time. Unfortunately, he was not the protagonist, and Chang-Yuan was just giving him a demonstration. "I'm done. Come take a look." Chang-Yuan called Poplar Fruit over and handed the SLR to Poplar Fruit. Then he ran to the side and unscrewed his own bottle to drink water. He was so thirsty. Looking at Chang-Yuan's video, Poplar Fruit understood what professional was. Of course, Chang-Yuan wasn't a professional videographer. However, he spent a lot of time outside, secretly taking pictures of other people. When he was bored, he figured out a lot of tricks to using a DSLR. Now, the video he shot was no worse than a professional videographer. "Just shoot according to this?" Chang-Yuan asked. Poplar Fruit nodded. Although he couldn't shoot as well as Chang-Yuan, he could still draw a similar picture. During the first shoot, Poplar Fruit didn't seem to find the right position, and Chang-Yuan quickly came over to guide him. The second time, they NG'd again. This time, it wasn't Poplar Fruit's fault, but Chang-Yuan himself. In fact, it wasn't Chang-Yuan's fault. It was because the naughty Kiki suddenly ran out and made a face at him. Chang-Yuan went around the tree and looked up. When he saw Kiki's funny little face, he was happy and laughed. This was only the beginning. Chang-Yuan was distracted and did not pay attention to his feet. As a result, he kicked a grass pit and almost fell to the ground. "Kiki, come here. Don't disturb Uncle Che." Poplar Fruit couldn't stop laughing. He finally managed to get Kiki to come back. After 2 more takes, Chang-Yuan was so tired that he was panting. However, the final result was much better. Holding the DSLR, Poplar Fruit looked at Chang-Yuan's performance on the small screen. He felt that it was a waste for this guy not to walk the path of an actor. She wondered if it was because of her good skills as a private investigator that she had developed. As a private detective, he often faced the danger of being discovered when he was following someone. After all, some people had a naturally sensitive sixth sense. This was a test of one's acting skills. In the past, Chang-Yuan had followed Poplar Fruit in school. When Poplar Fruit turned around, he did not notice him at all. At that time, this guy instantly turned into a young junior and acted very well. Regardless of whether Chang-Yuan's acting skills were innate or acquired, in this video, he was able to portray Zhu Beiji's comical expression of panic, fear, and peace of mind when he was trying to escape from the script. Perhaps the cowardly Zhu Beiji was supposed to be like this. Poplar Fruit had such a thought in his mind. To be able to act so vividly and give people the feeling that it was real, this should be considered a huge breakthrough, right? How was it? Chang-Yuan took big gulps of water and asked anxiously, "Do you want to do it a few more times?" Poplar Fruit raised his head and smiled. "No need. This time was pretty good. Your acting was great." "Really?" Chang-Yuan asked excitedly. "I said it was okay. This has to be approved by others." Poplar Fruit smiled. "Give me the memory card first. I'll send it to the beast when I get back. I'll let you know if there's anything else." Chang-Yuan said gratefully, "Understood, understood." Poplar Fruit wanted to go back. Chang-Yuan habitually asked him to stay. "Poplar Fruit, you're leaving so early? Don't you want to stay for dinner?" "No need." Poplar Fruit climbed into the Land Rover and smiled. "Besides, you just moved in. The stove hasn't been set up yet. How can you eat? Just remember it first." After returning home, Poplar Fruit sent the video to the beast. Just as Poplar Fruit said, whether Chang-Yuan was good or not was not up to Poplar Fruit to decide. It was up to the beast's opinion. It had to be said that Chang-Yuan's acting skills were really good. Less than 2 hours after Poplar Fruit sent the video, the beast called. At that time, Poplar Fruit was playing the hottest ethnic trend square dance video for Kiki in the living room. Kiki wiggled her little butt and imitated the aunties dancing. Kiki's dance was only half of the movement and was intermittent, but Kiki was too cute. Seeing her swinging her hair and wiggling her little butt, Poplar Fruit could not help but slap his thigh and laugh. The beast's call was drowned out by the rich sound of the hottest ethnic trend music. He persevered and called one after another. Fortunately, on the third call, Poplar Fruit finally noticed. "Hello, beast, sorry." Poplar Fruit was about to apologize for not paying attention to the call. But just as he spoke, he was interrupted by the beast. "Poplar Fruit, where did your friend come from? His acting is too good." The beast exclaimed exaggeratedly on the phone. "Really?" Poplar Fruit was overjoyed and asked, "Do you think he's suitable for the role of Zhu Beiji? In terms of expression, movement, and acting skills, he's the perfect candidate," the beast said. But his tone took a turn. "But your friend is a little too handsome and too skinny. He's too different from Zhu Beiji." Was Chang-Yuan handsome? Poplar Fruit did not think so. However, after hearing the beast's words, Yangwa thought about Chang-Yuan's fair skin and high aquiline nose. He looked very exotic. Looking at him carefully, he was a little handsome. Perhaps he would suit the tastes of most young women. "Then, beast, what do you mean?" Poplar Fruit asked uncertainly. With such a good actor, of course we'll use him. But the script might change because of him. That's okay. We just want to subvert people's perception of Zhu Beiji." The beast laughed and said, "Poplar Fruit, help me tell your friend I'll give this role to him. Tell him to come to Beijing to find me as soon as possible." Okay. Poplar Fruit agreed happily. He did not expect Chang-Yuan's matter to go so smoothly. At first, Poplar Fruit thought that Chang-Yuan might need to be like Sun Wukong, who had to go through 81 difficulties. In the end, Chang-Yuan solved the problem with a video and did not even need a second audition. People still had to rely on their abilities to speak. So, Chang-Yuan's matter of becoming an actor was settled. He finally walked on the path of stardom that he had wanted to walk, but did not have the connections to do so. There will be 10 chapters today. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal. Chapter 349. Third update. Poplar Fruit was the one who sent Chang-Yuan to the capital. Even though she had only been in the profession for a little over a year, even though the so-called martial arts of today were like an old man with no future, Yangwa still had a passion for martial arts. It was just like when he read Elder Jin's novels back then. He couldn't bear to part with this martial arts world that was filled with gratitude and revenge. Of course, in a modern society, it was impossible to break the law with martial arts, and it was not allowed to take revenge. For most people, the law was a red line that they did not dare to cross. But Poplar Fruit saw Chang-Yuan, who also had a passion for martial arts and tradition. He did not hesitate to do some work that people looked down on in order to pass on the sect, but he still wanted to help him to get on the right path and get out of trouble. That was why today's result was achieved. However, Yangwa didn't expect that the little bit of effort he put in would be repaid by Chang-Yuan. "What are you doing?" Sitting in the driver's seat, before he started the car, Poplar Fruit saw Chang-Yuan, who had just packed his luggage and got in the car, hand over a red silk bag from the back seat. "Is it for Kiki?" Kiki, who was sitting in the baby's safety seat, turned her head and asked happily. "Yes, it's for you." Chang-Yuan smiled at Kiki. "It's to thank your father for his kindness." Poplar Fruit frowned and said, "Brother Jun, what are you doing? Don't tell me I'm helping you just for your money." Chang-Yuan rolled his eyes and said, "Poplar Fruit, look at your eyes. Is this money? If it's money, I won't give it to you." Chang-Yuan said with a bit of ridicule, "You could drive a million-yuan Land Rover. My little money, do you think it's enough for you? Don't make me sound so vulgar." "What do you mean I don't think it's enough for me?" Poplar Fruit said unhappily, "Money is not the standard to measure a person. I don't care if it's money or not. Just keep it. I don't want it." Kiki bit her finger. She looked at her father and then looked at the thing wrapped in red cloth. She didn't understand why they were pushing it back and forth. Why don't you open it and take a look first? Che and Jun laughed. Let's talk about it later. What? You're so weird. The poplar fruit reluctantly removed the silk cloth and saw an exquisitely printed thread-bound book. The title of the book was 8 Steps Meteor Kick. Your sex secret manual? Poplar fruit shook his head violently and said, Then I can't take it. Poplar fruit. Che and Jun was anxious and said, I know that your kung fu is powerful and you may not be interested in our sex kung fu, but this is the best way I can think of to thank you. Your hand kung fu is very strong, but your leg kung fu is still lacking a little bit of maturity. I didn't see it wrong. If we have a fair competition of leg kung fu and nothing else can be moved, then I will definitely win. Che and Jun said, If you want to go further in kung fu, this book can help you a lot. That won't do. Poplar fruit insisted, I'll help you. That's my willingness. I accept your secret manual. That means I'm plotting to steal your sex kung fu. Moreover, if you give me this book, that's also treacherous and revealing the sex secret. Now I'm the only one who knows 8 Steps Meteor Kick. Can still be called a sect. There's still secrets there? Che and Jun said bitterly. Up to now, 8 Steps Meteor Kick actually exists in name only. Although I don't want to admit it, I really have no way to give this sect a new life. You can do it. Poplar fruit persuaded. You don't have to be so pessimistic. If you become a big star in a movie, then you can promote 8 Steps Meteor Kick. Just like Jeet Kune Do. Isn't it also famous because of Bruce Lee? It's not the same. Che and Jun sighed and said, Bruce Lee was a great master of his generation. His kung fu was self-contained. As for me, I'm relatively stupid when it comes to kung fu. 8 Steps Meteor Kick also lacks a lot of previous kung fu moves. Only the body kung fu is left. Even if I become famous, there's no way to revive 8 Steps Meteor Kick. Poplar fruit was silent. He understood what Che and Jun meant. How difficult was it to turn the tide with one's own strength in this era where kung fu was declining? What's more, 8 Steps Meteor Kick was not a very famous sect in history. Speaking of kung fu, it was not comparable to Wudong and Shaolin, which had thousands of years of accumulation. Just accept it. If you feel that this way of saying thank you is unacceptable, just think of it as sharing with a kung fu friend. Che and Jun persuaded. I can't do it, but if our 8 Steps Meteor Kick can be used well by you, I believe that the ancestors of our sect will be very happy. All right, I'll accept it. Poplar fruit stopped talking. He wrapped the red cloth again and put it away solemnly. He turned around and said, Let's go. If you don't go now, you'll miss the plane. After seeing Che and Jun off, he went back home and settled down Kiki, who fell asleep while enjoying the scenery. Poplar fruit sat in the living room and felt a little bored. After thinking about it, he opened the secret book given by Che and Jun. Since he had accepted it, he would read it openly. If he continued to be coy, it would be hypocritical. Although it was called a secret book, it was actually a book organized by Che and Jun based on the handwritten manuscripts of his ancestors. He found someone to print it out and then made it into a thread-bound book. It still doesn't have a picture. Poplar fruit looked at the secret book and felt a little depressed. When it came to body movements, how could one accurately understand the range and strength of the movements by just relying on the description of the words? Just like some recipes that said, put in the right amount of salt. Who knew how much salt was the right amount? If it was too much, it would be too much. If it was too little, it would not be enough. In the end, it still depended on one's own experience. Such a secret book was too irresponsible. Fortunately, Poplar fruit could still understand the description of some of the acupuncture points, muscles, and bones in the book. This was all thanks to the secret books he found on the internet at the beginning of the year. Those books were all written in an ancient language or terms that were commonly used in the past. There were also some annotations with modern terms. With this comparison, Yangwo was able to understand it. After reading this book, Poplar fruit realized that the 8 Steps Meteor Kick wasn't as simple as what Che and Jun had shown. This guy seemed to have only learned the tremble formula, leap, wave turning, inch piercing, and the tremble formula, leap, wave turning, inch piercing. There were more after that. It was indeed a pure martial arts technique. After Poplar Fruit read it once, he had a little bit of inspiration. He could feel that there were many areas where his body movements could be improved. This made Poplar Fruit interested. He decided that starting tomorrow, he would add a practice of the 8 steps meteor kick in the morning training. Maybe it was really like what Chan Yuan said. This martial arts technique could be of great help to him. There will be 10 chapters today. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 350. Fourth update. La la la, la la la. I'm an expert in selling newspapers. Kiki opened her small hands, sang the new children's song, and ran happily in the living room, followed by the fluffy Gold. Gold's neck was now tied with a collar with a bell. As Gold grew bigger, sometimes when it went out, Poplar Fruit couldn't let it run around willfully. Although it looked harmless, the golden retriever was still a large dog. Kiki ran to the front of the kitchen, pushed open the sliding glass door of the kitchen, and asked with a smile, "Papa, is it done?" The gap was pushed open by Kiki, and Gold also curiously put its head in. Following Kiki, it looked up at Poplar Fruit. Its long ears trembled slightly. "Not yet. How many times have you asked?" Poplar Fruit smiled, patted Kiki's little head, and said, "Play in the living room. Don't go around. The oil and smoke on the door is on your head." Kiki thought it was very funny and laughed and shrank her head back. The door was opened, and Song Ji-win casually walked in. He glanced at Poplar Fruit busy in the kitchen and asked Kiki, "Kiki, what delicious food did your papa make today?" Kiki looked at him with vigilance and slowly moved to the middle of the road between Song Ji-win and the kitchen. She shook her head and said, "I won't tell you." "Why?" Song Ji-win curled his lips and said, "Did you two secretly hide the delicious food and not give it to Uncle Mosquito?" "I won't give it to you." Kiki put her hands on her waist like an adult, puffed out her chest, and said angrily, Last time you ate that, the Kiki didn't know how to pronounce the name of that dish." "Braised pork trotters?" Song Ji-win reminded her. "That's right, you didn't share Kiki, you big jerk." Kiki said angrily. Last time, Song Ji-win refused to share the fragrant pig trotters with Kiki. Kiki still remembered that. "That's what your papa said. You can't digest pig trotters." Song Ji-win didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He realized that Kiki was the same as Poplar Fruit. Both of them were foodies. They had a strong desire for food and were especially vengeful. "You can't pass." Kiki pouted, turned her head, and stood there with open arms. "Woof!" Goldie loyally stayed by Kiki's side and barked at Song Ji-win. "Have you forgotten about the ham I gave you last time?" Song Ji-win discontentedly criticized the ungrateful Goldie and said, "It barked at me. It's really fed to a dog." "I'm a dog, huh?" At this time, Poplar Fruit pushed open the door of the kitchen and came out, laughing loudly. "What delicious food did you make?" Song Ji-win smelled the aroma a long time ago and excitedly came over. "This is Kiki's." Kiki was anxious. She quickly ran in front of her father and looked back at Song Ji-win with vigilance. "Yes, this is Kiki's." Poplar Fruit put a plate with a small iron lid on the table and rubbed Kiki's hair with a smile. Then Poplar Fruit shrugged at Song Ji-win and said, "You definitely won't like it, so we'll cook it later." "What is it?" Song Ji-win's stomach was aroused by Poplar Fruit. He sat at the table and said, "How do you know I won't like it?" Seeing this, Kiki hurriedly went in front of her father and wanted to climb up the chair. With Kiki's current height, it was impossible for her to climb up the chair, but for Kiki, she had the best partner, Goldie. Without needing Chi-Chi to call out to it, Goldie eagerly ran to Chi-Chi as if it had a telepathic connection with her. It obediently lay down and allowed Chi-Chi to step on its back. Using the 20 centimeters of height, Chi-Chi struggled to climb onto the chair. Poplar Fruit quickly picked her up, rubbed her little head, and said with a smile, "Don't worry, it's all yours. Wait for Dad to take the porridge out for you." When he left, he didn't forget to look back. Poplar Fruit reminded Song Ji-win, "Don't move, or Kiki will really hate you next time." Song Ji-win resentfully retracted his restless hand. Poplar Fruit weighed out the porridge that was slightly overcooked in Kiki's small bowl, moved Kiki's special dining chair, and carried Kiki up. "What is it? What is it?" Song Ji-win craned his neck to look. "Braised tofu." Poplar Fruit smiled and opened the lid, revealing the mysterious food on the plate. "You definitely don't like it, right? 'Tis tofu and no meat. It's not delicious, not delicious." Song Ji-win, who couldn't be happier without meat, shook his head in disdain. "Why did you think of making this?" Poplar Fruit had long expected this guy's expression. He smiled and said, "A few days ago, I watched the popular China on a bite of China on the internet. I felt that the tofu was not bad. It was soft and nutritious, especially suitable for Kiki, so I gave it a try." Poplar Fruit's braised tofu was not the kind of braised tofu made with chili. His tofu looked very red, but in fact, it was a sauce made with tomatoes, an all-natural tomato sauce. Under Poplar Fruit's exquisite knife skills, the muddy tofu was cut into small round balls, just like meatballs. In order not to destroy the structure, Poplar Fruit basically fried every piece that was cut and only fried the surface layer until it was slightly golden. Then he took it out. This way it would not be too hot. Then he added some tomato sauce and some seasonings and braised the tofu balls. Poplar Fruit did not use a spatula. He relied on his own arm strength to shake the iron pot so that the sauce and the tofu balls were well mixed. He let the taste of the tomato sauce permeate the tofu balls before finally taking out of the pot. Actually, it was not very difficult. The most important thing was the control of the heat. If the knife skills were not good, the tofu would not look that good. However, this dish was extremely delicious for Kiki. The thick, sour, and sweet juice of the tomatoes, and the smooth and fragrant taste of the tofu. Poplar Fruit had tried it once yesterday, and Kiki liked it very much. The show said that tofu was rich in protein and various mineral elements, and tomatoes were also rich in vitamins. The combination of the two was even more beneficial. At this stage, Kiki needed to replenish her nutrients the most. However, Kiki could not eat too much meat because meat was hard to digest. Poplar Fruit made all kinds of delicious food for Kiki. During this period of time, he found a new source of inspiration. It was the popular A Bite of China that had been airing for the past few months. The show allowed Poplar Fruit to taste the various delicacies of their country, and it also stimulated his interest in cooking. It was only then that he realized that on a small dining table, there were so many different kinds of dishes that could be made. Song Ji-win also watched the show. He did not have any interest in tofu, but with so many meat delicacies on the show, it really made him salivate. At this time, he had started to pester Poplar Fruit to make him a serving of steamed pork with cinnamon. There will be 10 chapters today. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Everyone, please use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to that you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.